If you would like to support the channel, please consider becoming a patron on Patreon. More information in the description below. There's an old story, ancient some might say, about a holy relic called the Arm of God. The being this arm was attached to descended to the earth after a wish reached its star. For the entirety of their existence, all humanity had to believe in were their wishes, and that one of them contacted the star was nothing short of a miracle. The being from the star pretended to be a human and walked amongst humanity for a time, and out of love, he wanted to give eternal life to the humans he came to know. But doing so required the humans to be infected with a part of the god, a disease which killed so many of them. But the few who did survive its terrible effects were made to be immortal ones. By the hands of humans, the god was torn apart, but perhaps in regret, the humans longed to revive their lost god. According to the story, the god who was deep in sleep never answered their prayers. It is believed that the immortal ones still walk the earth to this day. This ties in with another brief legend about a knight named Guillaume. Ages after the death of the god from the stars, Guillaume the king's knight was traveling on a rocky mountain near the crash site of the ancient star, and there he came across a strange, shining tree with fruit which resembled gold coins. Guillaume found that this fruit could heal sickness and plague. He joyously built a castle around the gold coin tree, and he was called the Holy Knight, or he called himself a Holy Knight. Although in modern times, the castle was said to have been built by an aristocrat who devoted themselves to occultism after having a vision of the golden tree. Eventually, the castle would be used as a mental institution, but after a great fire took place, it was converted into a hotel. The gold coin tree was kept safe and hidden away, and if any approached the tree with greed in their heart, it would burn them and deny them its fruit. Let's hear one more tale about a saint named Frangelico. It was said that Saint Frangelico found himself atop a mountain near the castle of Knight Guillaume, also near the crash site of that ancient star, and there he met a one-winged angel. It's not known what was said to Saint Frangelico, but in the aftermath, he founded a new church, and upon the site, a humble cathedral was built. To reach Saint Frangelico Cathedral, pilgrims would gather at the lowest point of the area where a tiny place called Moonlight Village lay, where a mechanical system was put in place to ease their travel up the slopes. Not far from Moonlight Village, the St. Frangelico Cathedral, quite nearby the castle of the Knight Guillaume, and practically built on top of the ancient star crash site, was a tiny village called Crot. All these places together created a community in these isolated mountains and hills. There were old families who held power, and some forms of industry and trade, and the allure of the cathedral always kept people coming through, but it was not a prosperous place. Over the many years ahead, the cathedral experienced some decline from the number of pilgrims that visited and a lack of resources or wealth to fix it. 600 years ago, a tragedy took place in Crot when the ground caved in just west of the town. Farmers and livestock fell into the pit, and the people who went in to collect their bodies found odd clusters of rock there, with a blue mineral nestled into it. They called the place the Devil's Pit and the clusters Crowd. Not understanding what the blue mineral within the crowd was, they left the Devil's Pit and the crowd be, and the event of that day passed into memory. Change came to Crot between 3 and 4 decades ago. A collection of intrepid hunters called the Alchemists arrived, and it's here that we pause for a moment because their arrival was a part of a far grander plot. Amongst the Alchemists was a living legend, Philippus Paracelsus. It is entirely possible, if not probable, that Paracelsus was an immortal one, the product of the god from the star's gift. But to say Paracelsus was enigmatic barely scratched the surface of the mystery behind the supposed young man. He was obsessed with the symbol of Ouroboros, which in alchemy represented the concept of eternity and continuous return. It's the serpent, perpetually devouring its own tail. He even crafted a spectacular weapon called the Ouroboros Eye to honor the symbol, and Paracelsus's game was eternal life, which he understood came in many forms. Sometime before the alchemists arrived in Crot, he departed from the group and entered into the service of another organization which has no known name to us. The group had the Arm of God, knowledge of the legends around Crot, and a plan that Paracelsus fit perfectly into. It would be called the Krot experiment. They would guide the alchemists toward Krot, towards the crowd and its blue mineral. They believed this blue mineral had magical properties about it linked directly to the god from the star. From that god's gift came the immortal ones, never mind all those that died. Krot would need to be a large-scale testing field. The alchemists would uncover its secrets, and from afar, Paracelsus and his organization would manipulate events there. So, returning to the alchemists, they had heard the legends of this place. Changes weren't immediate, but the alchemists got in cozy with the Archbishop of the St. Frangelico Cathedral and the old families of Krot. Archbishop Andreas was a beloved head figure within Krot. He was warm, kind, and devoted. So great was his devotion and leadership that he could change the hearts of even murderers. Many called him a saint for his good works, but bit by bit, the Archbishop conceded control over parts of Krot to the alchemists. Not even a man as dedicated as himself could resist the allure of gold and comfort for long. The old families were a bit more difficult. They understood the value of the lands they presided over. If the alchemists wanted something, they had to go through the old families. A man named Valentinius Monad sat as, or came to sit as, the leader of the alchemists. And while not much is known about Valentinius, he wasn't a particularly moral man. Perhaps not outright evil in a stereotypical sense, but he could be brutal in his choices. Like when the crash site of that ancient god from the stars was discovered, they learned this place was called the Devil's Pit some 600 years ago, and the clusters called Crowd. It had long been covered by earth, now a series of caverns better suited as a mine. With the blessings of the old families, the alchemists began recruiting workers to dig out the strange blue ore within, and oh, what wondrous things they would come to discover. The mine would henceforth be known as the Relic of Trismegistus, and the blue mineral within the crowd clusters would be known as ergo. The crowd itself was a hassle to deal with. It was ultimately the ergo that the alchemists wanted. At this point in time, there wasn't a lot of crowd that they could get access to, so the study of ergo was pretty slow going. And they found that the mine workers were getting sick, which the old families stepped in to cover up. These poor people died terrible deaths, which Valentinius Monad was well aware of and sanctioned. One of the genius minds amongst the alchemists was a man named Giuseppe Geppetto, and Geppetto believed that he could use the ergo as fuel in a mechanical heart, which ultimately led to the creation of puppets. Quite suddenly, ergo became more precious than gold, and all within Krot were oblivious as to the true nature of it. They didn't know what ergo really was, but they persisted despite these unknowns. The era of Krot's industrial boom and expansion began. A father is like God to his son. This was exactly the case to young Simon Manus. When the potential power of ergo was discovered, his father joined in the research, and he used his own son as a test subject. This torture did unlock something within Simon. Somehow, through the ergo, he was able to read minds and memories. This created so many questions about the true nature of ergo, how something like that could be possible. But Simon's father deemed him to be a failure. He abandoned Simon, and the ability to read minds and memories was not a gift. Simon suffered greatly as he grew, knowing the true hearts of those around him. He wouldn't have been able to bear it had it not been for another special child, the daughter of the leader of the alchemists, Sophia Monad. Sophia's mother, Isabel Monad, was a listener. She could hear ergo. This would allow her to communicate directly with puppets through ergo. But Isabel deemed this ability to be a curse, so when Sophia presented with the same listener abilities, the girl kept it a secret. Later in life, Simon would say that Sophia's pure good heart was a soothing gift, but they would walk very different paths. Simon rose in the ranks of the alchemists, and the younger Sophia grew up with her family primarily in Krot. The creation of the puppets caused a boom in Krot. The city grew in size at a startling rate. The population exploded, entire industries created to support the creation of Giuseppe Geppetto. The puppets were single-minded creations, specifically crafted to serve a particular function. Some were maids, butlers, nannies, city cleaners, and eventually they even started serving in roles like police and entertainers. With each passing year, the puppets became more advanced and Krot grew. Long gone was that tiny town of farmers and pilgrims. And too came new factions and guilds, like the famous Stalkers. The Stalkers were animal mask-wearing armed forces for hire, often identified specifically by the distinct masks that they wore. Of them were two factions, the Sweepers and the Bastards. The Sweepers hailed from the lower classes. Their battle style was grisly and brutal. They acted in service to the old families of Krot. And the Bastards were from the upper class, with a more refined and graceful fighting style. They acted in service to the Alchemists and the workshop. They could be bodyguards, discreet problem handlers, some were even treasure hunters. The two factions were respected amongst the people of Krot, or sometimes just outright feared by them. The Stalkers weren't generally shit-kickers, though, especially when it came to business, and it was common for youth who felt like outcasts to grow up dreaming of becoming a stalker. One very fateful day, something absolutely profound happened. A puppet went against their purpose, against their directive. A maid puppet named Camille caught a baby falling from their crib, and while it was a good heroic deed, that function was not programmed into Camille. And here's the thing about Camille. She was built in the likeness of somebody who had died, and she worked in the service of somebody with the initials GG. The observer of this event knew enough about puppets to understand that this violated her programming. Arguably, that man, GG, was Giuseppe Geppetto. The nanny puppet was named and modeled after his deceased wife, and when the puppet was taken in for interrogation, they discovered that she could understand language through ergo wavelengths. And she said to them, "Send me back to my child." Puppet Camille had manifested an ego of the deceased human Camille. She was taken apart and studied. This event opened up a new line of questioning as to the true nature of ergo and its potential. It was decided that the Alchemists needed a place all of their own, a place separate from peering eyes within Krot, where they could govern themselves and run their experiments. Off the coastline near Krot, the perfect spot was found. Perfect because if they could build a tower high enough, it would be the most efficient place in all the world to study ergo and its wavelengths. A massive complex was built on the island, which would be called the Arch Abbey on the Isle of the Alchemists. The Arch Abbey seemed one part scientific university, one part religious institution, and it all was presided over by Valentinius Monad. The island was only accessible via authorized sea vessels. Sailing a ship out there without permission was a good way to be sunk to the bottom of the sea. And back in Krot, a union called the Workshop worked hand in hand with the Alchemists to bring their visions to life in Krot. The Workshop were the master craftsmen and engineers who made the city what it was. While the Alchemists still answered to the old families of Krot when it came to certain matters regarding funding or cover-ups, they for the most part were unsupervised, and before them was a playground of possibility. The awakening of the puppet Camille's ego wasn't the last time something like this would happen. Among the prestigious names of Krot was the Vanini family. The Vaninis were pioneers in the puppet industry. They created the first automated puppets, a manufacturing line of cogs and ergo. They were massive contributors to the economic boom and expansion of Krot, and as a result, they were like royalty in the city. One night, Mr. and Mrs. Vanini took their young son, Lorenzini Vanini, out for a night on the town, and while they walked down a dark alley together, they were spotted by a puppet who had become self-aware, Arlecchino. And Arlecchino was a serial killer. Arlecchino decided that this little family would be his next set of victims, not because of who they were or what they had contributed to the production of puppets, but because they looked happy, so damned happy. In their final moments of life, the parents of little Lorenzini begged Arlecchino to not kill their boy, and he didn't. Not out of mercy or because he was directed not to, he chose not to because he was curious. What would this entitled child become after being so traumatized? As a parting souvenir, Arlecchino took little Lorenzini's toy, a special warrior doll inspired by his favorite movie. The killer would go on to have his fun around Krot. Eventually, the hunted killer Arlecchino would find his way to the Isle of the Alchemists. He had tortured its location out of an alchemist he managed to corner, and it's here, fortunately, that his mayhem would be stopped. His puppet body was damaged, and he locked himself in a room, and there he would stay, patiently awaiting his next opportunity. The murders were covered up by the Alchemists and the Workshop Union. Imagine the absolute panic if the public found out puppets murdered two very well-known people. It was attributed to a mugging gone wrong, but young Lorenzini Vanini knew better. He knew that it was a puppet that had done it. But the boy did not go public. Instead, as he grew up, he maintained a cheerful spirit. Lorenzini became a genius inventor who sought to change the world for the better, specifically through puppet manufacturing and improvements. He wanted to ensure that what happened to his parents never happened again. Every year, he requested the case files behind his parents' murder, and every year he was denied, but still he persisted. Giuseppe Geppetto was a terrible father, and his son Carlo came to deeply resent him for it. The boy's mother, Camille, had died long ago, and Geppetto was far more interested in his work with the Alchemists than he was his own son. When the boy was old enough, he sent him to the Monad Charity House, a respected boarding school set up by Valentinius Monad's wife, Isabel. And he hated it there right away. He would ask when his father was coming back, how many more sleeps he had to wait. To alleviate the boy's anxiety, he was introduced to an orphan boy named Romeo, who also attended the school. Carlo was hesitant, instead curling into a ball, but Romeo trotted right over and asked if he wanted to be a stalker one day too, asked if they could train together, and told Carlo to call him Lampwick. After that, they were inseparable. The Monad's daughter, Sophia, had a large hand in the goings-ons of the charity house, and often worked alongside her mother to coordinate events. It could have been Sophia herself that introduced Carlo and Romeo. Sophia, being a listener, gave her a very unique connection to Ergo. She could hear puppets through it. She could communicate with them. And over the years, she would learn the true nature of Ergo. Sophia understood that Ergo was the essence of a person, like their soul, some might say. When a person died, their ergo would naturally leave their body. Think of it like a fine mist. But what if that fine mist could be gathered up and frozen? The whole essence of a person stored within the product. That's what was fueling the puppets of Krat. The essence, the souls of once living humans. Sophia did not reject her abilities like her mother did. She delved into the secrets of being a listener and discovered that through Ergo, she could rewind time. We fast forward now, about a decade after Carlo was dumped off at the Monad Charity House by his father. Carlo and Romeo were approaching their graduation. Krat had become a spectacle of a city. The Workshop Union was ever at work expanding and improving upon it. Lorenzini Vanini was still in his teens, yet he was a titan of the puppet industry. While the city grew, trouble had been brewing in the slums, though. The appearance of a disease, the same one that killed the miners when the relic of Trismegistus started being excavated. Stone-like patches would gradually grow over their body, organs would shut down over time, they would mentally deteriorate, and their blood turned blue. And at the end of it, they would be left unmoving, as though frozen in time. It was said that it locked them inside a cage, inside their own bodies, freezing their body, mind, and their very essence in a moment. It was dubbed the petrification disease because of what it did to its victims. It had been going on for years, but the public never really seemed to be made too aware of it. The Alchemists knew a bit about it, that it had to do with ergo exposure. They watched it closely, and because of how Krat was very intentionally built, it was easy to quarantine the slums by cutting off access in or out. Victims of the disease were taken and studied by the Alchemists at their Arch Abbey on the Isle of the Alchemists. Under the watchful eye of Valentinius Monad and his now right-hand man Simon Manus, a cure was sought. Except Simon's heart really wasn't in it. He never really recovered from the cruelty of his father, and he had little love for humanity and their lies. He decided to dedicate his entire life to proving his worth. Remember, a father is like God to his son. So what better way to prove himself than to ascend to godhood? He wanted more power, and he knew that through Ergo he could have it. As a boy, he was exposed to it, yet he survived and became more than human. Why did almost all succumb to it as a disease? And Simon Manus's ambitions were noticed by the order employing Philippus Paracelsus. This man was a bomb just waiting to be set off, so what if they gave him the tools to do just that? Philippus Paracelsus took the arm of God to Simon Manus, the powerful relic from the god from the star. From it came the original petrification disease so long ago, the crowd, the ergo. From that being, the immortal ones were made. Who better to test its limits than one like Simon Manus? It had been long enough. The Crot experiment needed to progress. When it was time for the duo to graduate, Carlo was further hurt by his father when the old man didn't even bother attending the graduation. Romeo comforted his friend, who was so angry that he said he didn't care if Geppetto died, but Romeo reminded him to be grateful that he had any family at all. Instead of giving it to his father, Carlo gave Romeo his graduation necklace. But the duo were interrupted by the arrival of a stalker from the Bastards. The two of them were soon to be adults. They would need to choose their paths in life, and they asked the woman if she would train them. But the stalker was irritated by their presence and ordered her attendant Gemini to get rid of them. She was long gone from the property when something unthinkable took place. Precise details on what happened were never released, but everyone in the Monad charity house was killed or deemed missing after an event called a large-scale spreading of the petrification disease took place. Romeo and Carlo were amongst the dead. When the stalker who denied them training returned once the event was over, she stood over Carlo's body and spoke her sorrow to him, how she wished she'd gotten there sooner. Also among the dead were Isabel Monad and her husband, the leader of the Alchemists, Valentinius Monad. Sophia Monad was missing. So why did this happen? Who was the big target in all of this? Well, that's a trick question because there were actually two targets, Valentinius and Sophia Monad. See, Simon Manus had no interest in curing the petrification disease, and he had the arm of God in his possession. He'd been using it to experiment on humans at the Arch Abbey on the Isle of the Alchemists, and somehow, Simon Manus figured out Sophia's secrets. It's hard to conceal things from a man who can possibly read your mind under the right conditions. He had plans for Sophia at the Arch Abbey. And while yes, there was no official cause given for how everyone very suddenly died to the petrification disease, it's very hard to imagine anyone other than Simon Manus being behind it. And with no one to stand against him, he took over leadership of the Alchemists. Giuseppe Geppetto was devastated by the loss of his only son, the son that he had so cruelly neglected. He knew better than almost all the true nature of the petrification disease, of ergo, how upon death their essence was trapped within their body as though frozen in time. He went to the charity house and collected the ergo of his son and of Romeo. He remembered the puppet Camille, stories of Arlecchino the killer. Almost certainly there were other puppets out there that had become self-aware. What if he could put the ergo of Carlo into a puppet and get his boy back? Geppetto left the Alchemists, took up work with the workshop union, and began designing a very special puppet heart that he would call the P organ. One day it would hold his son's ergo and breathe life back into his Carlo. Authorities ceased investigating the Monad charity house tragedy in order to conceal the huge outbreak of petrification disease there. They didn't want to risk a public panic, and it was very quietly swept under the rug. Outbreaks of the disease started cropping up intermittently, and eventually, things just kind of went back to normal in Crot. By the time Lorenzini Vanini was 18 years old, he had built the greatest puppet manufacturing company in Crot, and he aided in the establishment of the Grand Covenant. It was another step in ensuring that what happened to him never happened to anyone else. Created by Giuseppe Geppetto, the Grand Covenant was a set of laws programmed into all puppets. First law, all puppets must obey their creator's commands. Second law, a puppet may not harm humans. Third law, a puppet protects and serves humans in the city of Crot. Fourth law, a puppet cannot lie. Vanini trusted Geppetto above all others, so he ensured that the Grand Covenant was programmed into every current and new puppet in Crot. So great was Vanini's trust in Geppetto that he never questioned it, and he never would have thought possible that Geppetto would have put in a Law Zero. Law Zero, the creator's name, is Giuseppe Geppetto, meaning that he could supersede all other laws as their creator. Vanini's outlook on puppets was full of optimism and shades of gray. After his parents died, all he had left on a personal level was his puppet butler, Pulcinella. And Pulcinella, very much like the puppet that had killed his parents, had become self-aware. Vanini knew it too. But Pulcinella adored young Lorenzini. He showed him love and was his forever ride-or-die companion. Vanini trusted and cared about Pulcinella. So the two of them decided to keep Pulcinella's awakening a secret, for fear that the puppet would be taken away if authorities found out. Simon Manus and the Alchemists took an exceptionally dark turn over the coming years. Eventually, all pretenses for finding a cure to the petrification disease were dropped. Those alchemists, who were still good of heart, caught on to the human experiments and torture taking place in the Arch Abbey. Those who still had a conscience departed from the alchemists, or at least tried to. One of those alchemists was a young man who would later be called Alidoro. Alidoro had come to Krat from the east, from across the ocean with his then baby sister Eugenie. He raised her for some time, but once he became aware of what was happening within the Arch Abbey and in Krat, he too departed from the alchemists. But he was so racked with guilt for being a part of it and perhaps contributing to what was taking place that he decided to put little Eugenie into the care of others, and he assumed the name Alidoro. He donned the mask of a hound and he became a vigilante. Alidoro worked with a highly motivated reporter named Medoro to get news about the alchemists out, though ultimately, Medoro would be the victim of a slanderous campaign led by City Krat leadership and the alchemists. Alidoro's story was suppressed as a result, and Medoro's reputation took a hit. With no one to oversee the alchemists at the Arch Abbey, they had a field day of unethical experimentation that lasted for years. Simon Manus built a great machine which ran cords through the walls of the abbey. This machine, at the highest point in the island, collected and distilled ergospores from all around Krat. While experimenting with elixirs which could interact with the petrification disease, a very special concoction was made. In a way, it returned life to the victims of the disease after they had died. After administering the elixir to someone with the disease while they were alive, they would rise again after death, though they were always violent, unthinking monsters that would be called carcasses. Simon Manus did not think this a failure, though. It was a step towards discovering the next stage in evolution. Their ergo remained within their bodies. They did reanimate, they walked again, so what was missing? Or were all those people meant to die, and evolution was only meant for a very special, chosen by God himself few? Well, more data was needed. More ergo would be needed. The petrification disease was still an issue within Krat. Not enough to cause a panic, but enough to be a public health concern. A very scummy alchemist found the formula for that elixir that created carcasses and believed it to be some sort of a cure for the disease. So he took it. He went to Krat and he set up shop. He started selling the elixir as a miracle cure, and it did alleviate symptoms, enough so that people felt like they'd been cured. The man became wealthy overnight, and everyone in Krat wanted to get their hands on his special elixir, not realizing they were drinking something that should have been labeled, makes you feel better, but after you die, you become a mindless, violent zombie full of concentrated ergo, piss, and vinegar. And oh, this was a perfect opportunity for Simon Manus, so perfect that it makes one wonder if the alchemist that smuggled out the elixir formula had help from Philippus Paracelsus himself. After these people died, their ergo would concentrate and it would be a gold mine, which he could use all for himself. All that needed to happen was mass death. Eventually, Simon hooked Sophia up into his great machine. He knew the current extent of her powers, knew of her abilities to hear and speak through ergo wavelengths, that she could manipulate the flow of time and reverse it. But he also knew that she could be capable of so much more, and he wanted that power under his control. She would power his machine, and this caused Sophia so much pain that it was torture. While the mad alchemists did their deeds, Giuseppe Geppetto too experimented over those years. He masterfully crafted puppet bodies that almost looked human. One of these prized puppets was made into the image of Romeo, his son's dead friend. Romeo would be the prime experiment before he moved on to perfecting Carlo, but he wouldn't waste his work on this puppet. After years of secretive experimentation, his Romeo creation was complete. Carlo would need more time. Carlo would have the P organ. Carlo would be made flesh and blood. He would just need the arm of God from Simon Manus to make that possible. The Isle of the Alchemists would be impossible for him to reach. It was too well fortified, even if he could get a boat to the island. He would need something to handle Simon Manus for him. But somebody else wanted the arm too. Remember Moonlight Village and the St. Frangelico Cathedral? The good Archbishop Andreas was still doing his works all this time. In his flock was a woman named Cecile, a deeply troubled individual who was a known murderer. Andreas had brought her some peace and acceptance by welcoming her into the cathedral as a nun, and she was ever grateful to him for his actions. Andreas knew that Cecile had been to, or had come from, the Isle of the Alchemists, and he heard of the relic called the Arm of God being there. Andreas grew to resent the old families and the alchemists, believing them to have brought filth and sin into Krat. So he asked Cecile to venture to the Isle of the Alchemists and to steal the Arm of God, an endeavor that she agreed to. Eventually, she would be successful, but before she reached the Isle, Simon Manus was ready to take his next step, his next great step. Krat was naturally infested with ergo spores. The petrification disease already had a presence, and many had already consumed that terrible elixir. There needed to be a second, greater wave, another outbreak of the disease. It's not clear how he managed it, if it was via Sophia, the Arm of God, or both, but the petrification disease raced through Krat. Districts were locked down, quarantined, but soon the deaths began, and those that had drank that elixir didn't stay down. Uninfected innocent people were killed by the risen carcasses. Their ergo was collected up at the Isle of the Alchemists. When the carcasses were put down, they left behind concentrated forms of their ergo. It led to chaos in the streets, but the city didn't fall. The disease was able to be contained, enough so that city leadership was setting up to host the Grand Exhibition, which would draw in travelers from all over the world, where the automated puppets and the city of the future would be showcased for the masses. That wouldn't happen, though. Geppetto. He'd completed Romeo and was working on Carlo. He experimented on a nameless puppet to test the P organ and whether this particular body would be suitable for his son, but what he found was the P organ wasn't strong enough to sustain the puppet. And this particular puppet was full of hatred. That was the only emotion it felt. It was destructive. So Geppetto removed the P organ and stored the puppet away in a chest. Even if the P organ was perfected, that nameless puppet was somehow far too unhinged and violent to be used for his son. So Geppetto modified the P organ so it could absorb ergo, and he created a new body for Carlo, completely in his son's image and designed to support these changes. He just needed enough ergo and the Arm of God to use on the puppet's body. Then, through a miracle and with Carlo's ergo, his son would be revived. So, when the petrification disease resurgence began, it was a perfect opportunity. All that ergo just waiting to be collected from the carcasses, which could strengthen the P organ and bring him one step closer to having Carlo back. Geppetto decided to use his Law Zero of the Grand Covenant. He would issue an order to all the puppets of Krat. But first, he would need something that could control all of them in real time. Romeo. Romeo would be his king of the puppets. Geppetto fully understood the crime, the sin he was committing. He wrote in his notes that while he didn't regret what he was doing, he hoped that the owner of the body finds peace through his revenge. Romeo would control all the puppets and take blame for what was about to happen, the puppet frenzy. Geppetto used Romeo to send his orders out to all the puppets via ergo wavelengths. Kill everything. Every puppet that didn't have an awakened ego complied with the order and a true slaughter began. The people of Krat were trapped, with locked-down districts preventing escape. They had the petrification disease at their back and maddened puppets at the door. Very few escaped the event. What Geppetto perhaps didn't realize, at least until it was far too late, was that all that ergo was being siphoned up to the Isle of the Alchemists, to Simon Manus's machine. Geppetto was secretly working on Carlo's puppet body in the back of a train car, where it was relatively safe from the chaos of Krat. But he had to get the Arm of God, which now had been stolen by Archbishop Andreas's helper, Cecile. And it wouldn't be long until Simon Manus noticed that the relic was gone, but Cecile had done well in hiding her tracks. Geppetto faced further complication when his king of the puppets, Romeo, rebelled against him. He became self-aware, and he started to remember who he was in life, and he defied Geppetto. The old man would no longer have control over the puppet frenzy, and now he had a very pissed-off puppet king gunning for him. And as for Sophia, She was a literal husk at this point, but her essence was trapped within herself, as though she were frozen in time, like the victims of the petrification disease. So deep was the pain that her mind shattered. Though she did want to stop Simon Manus, she more wanted to be set free from this body, even if it meant death. Through ergo wavelengths, she was able to project herself into other locations. Even if she wasn't actually physically there, it appeared as though she was. Through ergo wavelengths, she found Geppetto's puppet in that train car, and she brought life to the P organ heart in his chest. She would do the same for another nearby, a companion for the puppet, the cricket puppet Gemini. The human-like puppet awoke, rose from his chair, and Sophia placed her image into the famous Hotel Crot to await his arrival. Until Gemini was awake and ready, she would be his guide. This video is supported by patrons on Patreon, YouTube members, and Twitch subs. Want to help support the channels? You can become a patron on Patreon, a YouTube member, or a Twitch sub. For just a few bucks a month, you can help keep the channel going, and get a couple cool perks while you're at it, like supporter-only streams, extra and early content, and your name in the lore video credits. Check the description of the video for more information on how to support the channel. And while you're at it, why don't you come see us in the Discord too? Or find me on one of those other social media platforms that the kids are so into these days. But that's enough from me. Thank you for watching the video, and let's get back to the lore. The train car is intact, if not a bit overturned. There are puppet parts and surgical tools on the tables, but it means nothing to this newly awoken puppet. This is a strange new world for him. The voice of a woman he doesn't know and who's nowhere to be seen floods his mind gently to imply that she's the one who woke him. In the next car is a monad lamp with the awakening cricket puppet Gemini inside. She says that they can't wait for Gemini to wake up, they have to hurry on. Her name is Sophia, and she'll be awaiting him at Hotel Crot. She'll explain what's happening when he arrives. There are weapons for him to choose from at the end of the train car, and once he's armed, it's time to get out there into the world. It's nighttime now and raining. The lights of the train station illuminate all the bodies around the walkways. These people were nearly torn apart. There's blood everywhere, and the only thing still moving is a puppet, using a sign as a weapon. Somehow, this newly awoken puppet fights with the finesse of a bastard stalker. While the puppet fights his way through the station, he finds more deranged puppets, bodies, notes from people who couldn't make it out, and at the end is a big old boy, a police puppet, who has the keys to get out. Kinda looks like this thing was having a real human jam-making party over there, forbidden jelly straight from the heart of Crot. Beyond the station is where the true mayhem took place. An open roaded courtyard with broken carriages, suitcases, furniture, and bodies. People tried to flee with loaded up vehicles. The doors to the station were locked and everyone outside was killed by frenzied puppets. Out here, too, are the remnants of a stargazer that Sophia can put back together. These were used by stalkers of the past as a means to quick transport. She can help him travel between them, and he can use his ergo here to empower himself. That's what Geppetto wanted him to do. It's something the nameless puppet couldn't do with the weaker version of the P organ. The streets are full of hostile puppets, but none of them are too great of a threat, at least until he nears the entrance gates leading to the hotel. Sophia chimes in to warn him that a powerful parade puppet is blocking it and it's the only way in. A merchant nearby the area welcomes the puppet as a stalker, and he's surprised to see that one is still fighting, as it seems the entire organization fell apart once things went to hell. Most of them are dead now, and the only ones left are wannabes, which could make them dangerous. This guy, or others like him, will pop up around Crot with handy bits of info or fun inventory to sell to the puppet. They never ask too many questions and are generally a welcoming sight. The same cannot be said for what is in front of the entrance gate. Sophia wasn't exaggerating. The parade master is massive, and he can speak through the ergo wavelengths. It can barely be understood as words to those unequipped to hear them, but, well, this is New Game Plus. You're welcome. All you curious Georges out there, this is what those puppets were really saying. On the puppet's first attempt with this thing, he is knocked out, beaten down. Victory goes to the parade master. But this isn't death or finality because of Sophia. She can rewind time, take him back to the safety of a stargazer, and he'll be the only one aware of what has taken place. She is truly a powerful being and is hell-bent on this puppet succeeding as her champion. On round 2, though it's a messy fight full of awkward errors, the Parade Master is defeated. He says something about giving the king a real festival, but that's probably nothing, right? Beyond the gates, a dying puppet relays that puppets cannot go beyond the security of the hotel, and Sophia speaks up to confirm that. To get into the hotel, he'll have to lie. But Sophia assures him that he is a special puppet. He will be able to enter so long as he lies. The hotel defense system responds to his knock, welcomes him to the sanctuary of the Grand Covenant, and asks him to prove his identity. Doing so is as simple as a fib. Remember, according to the Grand Covenant, puppets cannot tell a lie. He says that he is human, and the door's open to him. Sophia has been waiting for this. While this isn't her true physical body, no one can tell the difference. It is a perfect projection. She doesn't know any more about the source of the puppet frenzy than anyone else, and tells the puppet that they need to find Geppetto if they want answers. It will be up to him to venture out, to find the inventor near Elysian Boulevard. He's the only one that stands a chance out there. There are many new friends to be made here, like Polendina, the puppet butler of Lady Antonia, the owner of Hotel Krat. He informs the puppet of things related to the Grand Covenant and will act as a vendor of rare items. Then, Lady Antonia herself. She somehow recognizes the puppet's face and realizes that he is Geppetto's creation. Perhaps Lady Antonia interacted with Carlo when he was alive. One must wonder if Lady Antonia was once a stalker herself. That is a lovely bird feather on her hat, isn't it? Lady Antonia has the petrification disease and is far enough along that even if she was suddenly cured, her body would die from the damage eventually. But there's not a hint of bitterness about her. She gives the puppet a set of clothes from a prestigious boarding school in Krat and tells him that Geppetto is an old friend and his son was like family to her, and then she bids him a safe journey through the city. Then he meets the weapon crafter Eugenie. Geppetto left with her a very special Legion arm to give to the puppet, a prosthetic that will allow him to customize how he wants to fight enemies. This one involves a massive hook. Oh, what fun! Eugenie tells him that he's very lucky to have something made by the Geppetto. She is from the workshop union and doesn't know where she came from, who her family is, but she is well adjusted, doesn't disclose much about herself for now, and promises to work on the puppet's weaponry whenever he is at the hotel. These are all that are currently at the hotel. With all his introductions made, the puppet sets out to Elysian Boulevard to find the craftsman Geppetto. The road is covered in bodies, people who couldn't make it to the sanctuary in time. Gemini chirps up when a tram starts to fall because somebody is on it. The Black Rabbit Brotherhood, he says. But that doesn't mean much right now. Pretty cool mask, though. Gemini is finally able to formally introduce himself. Seems he's woken up, and as they go, he'll chirp up to tell the puppet bits about the areas they're in. Famous people linked to it, things that happened here, or provide insights on things that are currently going on. He is a delightful and intelligent companion to have. He tells the puppet that Elysian Boulevard was a place for the rich and fancy folk of Krat, meaning people with way too much money could come here to buy stuff that was way overpriced. The only sounds through the streets are puppets groaning, wind, and the occasional bird squawk. This is a massive, densely populated city, and it's chillingly quiet. Moving through Krat will be difficult. Gates have been locked shut to prevent quarantine breaks, and the puppets have barricaded other routes to prevent people from escaping. It forces him down small streets and tight corridors where nigh constant ambushes are set up to catch victims. He does eventually encounter a single sad soul still locked away safely inside. She is sick with the petrification disease and doesn't have long left. Her family took away her baby and sent her here to the quarantine zone. But she asks the puppet if he would go to City Hall for her to find her baby there. And of course he'll go and he'll find her Elena, even if it's just so she can see the baby one last time. He eventually finds a bridge with a puppet body hanging from it in a macabre display. But there is a person here, standing outside a carriage, yelling at Geppetto to come out. This is what the puppet was searching for. This man is a stalker from the lower class sweepers. They use far more visceral, blunt styles of fighting than the bastards. That merchant said that the stalkers who were left were either amateurs or wannabes, and this guy is pissed about something. He's accusing Geppetto of knowing what caused the puppet frenzy, and he recognizes that this being before him is a puppet creation of Geppetto himself, which makes them enemies. This is the puppet's first run-in with a stalker, and if this guy is a wannabe or an amateur, then it's hard to imagine just how deadly a properly trained and tested stalker was. The arc of his swing is ridiculous, which makes it hard to dodge around him. The puppet has to completely clear the swing or get good at guarding against it. After a few tries, the mad donkey is put down. He is the first human being the puppet has killed. But he did it for this man, his creator. His hands are covered in the blood of a human for this, which is all too pleasing a sight for Geppetto to behold. Giuseppe Geppetto is a warm, welcoming man who touches the shoulder of the puppet as a father would his son. He humbly acknowledges why the mad donkey had every right to be angry with him, while completely skirting the truth behind his accusations. He even outright says that he should take responsibility for it, and then he pulls the puppet into his ploy under the guise of doing good. He needs the puppets at City Hall to be taken care of, and wouldn't he help the old man out? Hard to believe Geppetto has a single ill-willed bone in his body, isn't it, given how softly he speaks. He promises that when the puppet has done what has been asked of him, the two of them can meet and talk at Hotel Krat. City Hall isn't far away, just a block or two, down a gory road. Just outside the building, he finds a rather large, angry puppet hitting dead bodies with its fists, and next to it is something small and baby-like. It's a dirty, broken baby puppet. Gemini chirps up asking what they're supposed to do with it. They've not found any babies, so was this what the woman wanted? Are they supposed to just give her the baby puppet, even if it's not her Elena, or is this actually her Elena? The two of them think on it for a bit, moving up into the courtyard of City Hall, where another big boy is hanging out, though this figure is a rather sad one. This scrapped watchman was better known as Murphy. Murphy was an experiment, a puppet police officer and heroic mascot of Krat, but his central core overcharged, causing his back to bend horribly. He was discarded as a failure, but the children of the slums often played with him. They're the ones who dubbed him Murphy. They often played with him using whistles and even made him a small wooden doll of himself. The big guy fell to the puppet frenzy, but he never forgot the children he used to play with who made him so happy. The puppet puts the rampaging Murphy down. At least he's freed from the anger and loneliness that had taken over his existence. This was what Geppetto asked him to do, so he can return to Hotel Krat to speak with him. But first, the puppet and Gemini return to Elysian Boulevard, where that sickly woman was awaiting her baby Elena. She instantly knows that they have her baby, and her voice catches from happy weeping that she'll get to hold the baby once again. Neither the puppet nor Gemini know if this is really what she wanted, if she realizes that this is a puppet, but her happiness is so pure and she's so close to the end of her life that neither of them interrupt the moment with some harsh reality. They let her cry and hold the puppet, and she asks if the puppet thinks her baby is adorable, and he says that yes, she is a cute baby. It's the kindest thing that they can do. Now, they are ready to return to the hotel. The puppet puts on a new record that he's found so everyone can savor the music, finding that he too enjoys it, and he runs upstairs to speak with his creator, or rather his father, as Geppetto repeatedly reminds him. The old man says that even if he asks him to do something dangerous, the puppet is precious to him. There is a very important task ahead. The inventor Lorenzini Vanini went to his puppet factory to shut it down. It was still operating, pumping out fresh, frenzied puppets every hour. It has to be shut down, and Geppetto wants Vanini safely returned. He's responsible for the inventor's plight. Lorenzini trusted Geppetto like family. The older man should feel immense guilt for what he's inflicted on the younger one, so the puppet will step in and fix his mistake. Geppetto also tells him that there has been no news from the cathedral, from Archbishop Andreas. That place was a refuge for many, many people. It worries him, and it makes him suspicious that something foul has happened there. The puppet needs to go there to see what has become of the cathedral. Before he leaves, Geppetto reminds him that the hotel is the only safe place in Krat. The puppet must be careful who he tells about this place. They can't afford a ne'er-do-well getting in and causing problems, and he must to remember to always be a good boy to his father. The smokestacks of Vanini Works are easy to spot and a royal eyesore. The district around the works all seem to belong to Vanini too, as do most of the machines and trams in the city. Lorenzini is many things, but shy isn't one. There are pictures of himself posted all over the place advertising and showing off his work. But if you can look past the affluent playboy attitude and self-gratification, he has a deep story to tell that's layered in very difficult emotions and pain. Down a small road, when the puppet passes by it, a phone starts to ring. The person on the other end starts the call with a weird rhyme that doesn't really work and then introduces themselves as Arlecchino, the king of riddles. Fitting that he would be calling right outside Vanini works. But he has a clean slate with the puppet, and the king of riddles says that he has been selected to receive this phone call. He wants the puppet to solve a riddle, something that humans love to do, so he poses it to him. By morning it walks on feet numbering 4, at midday just 2, no less and no more. It walks on 3 feet when the evening arrives, and if you solve this, then I'll know you're alive. The puppet answers human to the glee of the king of riddles. This is his first step in proving that this puppet is actually living, but maybe he also just got lucky. The king of riddles will be around again later to test the puppet's humanity, honesty, and ability to lie. In the meantime, the king of riddles rewards him with a very special key, which will open a door marked with a Trinity symbol. He ends the call and, well, that was really weird, wasn't it? He seems like a fun guy, though. The interior of Vanini Works, though impressive, was probably a bit of a hellhole on even the best of days. It's pure industry with no comforts or frills. The sort of place that doesn't seem like a lot of fun to work at. But, thanks to the ingenuity of Lorenzini Vanini, the process was also almost completely automated. But even Gemini talks about the place being a little bit creepy, and rightfully so. It's like walking through an elementary school at night with the lights off, and it is definitely not health and safety compliant in here. The fighting isn't as difficult as it was on the road until the puppet really gets inside. Then there are mechs that double fist shields, acid water full of angry little puppet girls that are unpredictable, hallways with Indiana Jones style flaming balls of puppet parts, and, oh, a couple stalkers. One looks like a fancy bastard, the other looks more like a sweeper, but apparently they're working together. Red Fox and Black Cat they are, and they're friendly, almost suspiciously so. The Red Fox mentions being here on behalf of their former client, and that the puppet's presence may be a benefit to their former potential employer. They're talking about Lorenzini Vanini. They're not going to help him. No amount of money is worth dying over. Apparently, Vanini's request was so ridiculous that they laughed at him and left. Well, at least the guy is still alive. The puppet departs from the odd stalker duo peacefully, unsure if they've met a future foe or genuinely well-natured allies. Down a long corridor, the puppet comes across a door with the Trinity symbol on it. It's a match for the key that the King of Riddles gave him. And inside is weird. A lot about this place is weird. Looks like some place 3 aristocrats went to drink bad liquor, smell their own farts while they talk boring philosophy in an attempt to prove to themselves that their dads were super wrong about how really super smart they are. The note at the center of the room makes things more confusing, but assuming there are 3 of these places, maybe it'll all make sense eventually. It isn't Vanini Works. Maybe Lorenzini himself sat in one of these 3 chairs. Speaking of, the puppet finally finds Vanini deep in the works. He's talking to himself, hoping that his puppet butler Pulcinella is okay. He's trying to pump himself up for something, trying to pull himself together. He says he has to stop someone. The puppet's approach at first frightens him. He really is trying to defy his own nerves here. But he calms down when Geppetto's name is mentioned. It doesn't seem that Vanini has recognized the puppet as a puppet at first, a testament to the amazing work of Geppetto. He asks the puppet if he will help him find Pulcinella. That was the job he tried to get those 2 stalkers to go do. Go to the back door of the factory to check in on Pulcinella. The puppet was barricading it, but he never came back, and Vanini is worried sick over him. He, of course, wants to take back control of the factory, but saving Pulcinella would be a personal favor to him. And he warns the puppet of Fuoco, the puppet furnace master. Fuoco has started building an army of puppets and is marching them towards the cathedral. The damage may already be done, but Fuoco needs to be stopped. It's not hard to find the furnace master, and Vanini wasn't exaggerating anything about his warning. Fuoco is a wily boy, and mobile in a way one wouldn't expect, especially given his size. When Vanini was in charge, Fuoco was a loyal and dutiful puppet, but once the puppet frenzy began, there was a new king for him to serve, and he dutifully did so. Who is this new king he's talking about? With the Furnace Master defeated, destroyed, whoever this new king is, his army will be unable to grow. The city, and now apparently also the road to the cathedral, are still flooded with puppets, but at least it won't continue to crescendo. And it's a joy to find that Pulcinella is broken, but still intact at the back door. They run news of the butler back to Vanini, and though he's sad that his friend was hurt, he is relieved to know that he wasn't destroyed. He can repair Pulcinella. And the factory is back in his control. They all venture back to Hotel Crot, where Vanini will remain. He greets the puppet joyously in his corner of the hotel, and though clearly he's rocking one hell of an ego, he's also enduring about it. He will provide upgrades and changes to the puppet's Legion arm, and he'll provide occasional insights on things occurring within the city. As will his now repaired butler Pulcinella. Vanini discloses that the puppet frenzy was supposed to be impossible. He personally made sure that it was, by imprinting the Grand Covenant onto every puppet in the city. The thought of somebody tampering with it doesn't even cross his mind. The king that Fuoco spoke of was the king of puppets, and Vanini believes that the king of puppets himself is the cause of the frenzy. The puppet checks in with Sophia, who tells him a bit about her powers as a listener, which she inherited from her mother. Then he drops in to see Geppetto, who immediately says that because he didn't create every puppet in Crot, it's not surprising that some broke away from the Grand Covenant. There are a few puppets known to have gained self-awareness, but he poses the question if it's truly free will that they have, or if somebody else is controlling them. The puppet next needs to see to the cathedral. There were many refugees taking shelter there, and if the factory was sending puppets up the road, it could mean a catastrophe has or is about to take place. The puppet returns to Vanini Works and takes the exit out the back to follow the path the puppet army would have taken to reach the cathedral. It takes him through a series of caverns and caves, out to the road leading to Moonlight Town itself, and there are bodies all along the road. Gemini thinks that they're residents from Moonlight Town. The town itself looks more like a war zone. The buildings have been torn down or blown out. There are frenzied puppets everywhere and not a single person to be found until the puppet takes a stroll down a side path and finds this fellow. Jianzhou is his name. A pharmacist, he says. Jianzhou is seeking the gold coin tree and its fruit. He says he has the petrification disease and desires to create a cure. He tells the puppet that if they can find the gold coin fruit, he can exchange them with Jianzhou for very valuable items. Jianzhou seems to be a sweet young man. There's nothing suspicious about him, so it's far easier for the puppet to view him as a potential friend than anything else. The road through Moonlight Town gets worse at each bend. It was a complete massacre here, but there is hope at the end, a tram being watched over by a stalker. But she dashes that hope. She says that the cathedral isn't safe anymore. The people who went up there never returned. And she is here to prevent people from using the rail car. That is, unless he is a stalker. The puppet learned the stalker salute from another stalker, a mad one that attacked him, so he decides to tell a little lie, and he gives her the stalker's greeting. And it works. She buys it completely and gives him the key to the tram. So long as the puppet doesn't mess around with her or come back, she'll let him go in peace. While riding up the mountainside, Gemini tries to lighten the mood by giving the puppet a playful little history lesson on the cathedral itself and an introduction to where they're going. They're going on the pilgrim's journey, starting at the Path of Misery onwards to the Bridge of Atonement. It's a bit of silliness that rather seems to irritate the puppet. There's a new kind of trouble as soon as they're off that railway, a monster that they haven't seen before, a carcass. Remember, these are the victims of the petrification disease that drank that elixir made by the alchemists. When they died, they rose again as these creatures, with their ergo concentrated within their bodies. So the puppets from Vanini Works didn't make it up here, but something else sure as hell did. The puppet and Gemini have no idea what these things are, but they seem so out of place compared to everything else that they've seen. At the bridge before the cathedral, a puppet is calling out that the king wishes to eradicate all monsters born of the petrification disease, protect the humans. So says the king. Well, that's an odd thing for a puppet to say. The king of puppet wants to protect humans by killing monsters, and the monsters were made from people infected with the petrification disease? But during the frenzy, the puppets killed humans. So does that mean someone else was in charge during the puppet frenzy, and the King of Puppets wasn't in control from the start? Well, that's a most dire implication. Maybe the King of Puppets was in charge and did order the frenzy, but he just changed his mind halfway through. By the time the puppet is on the bridge, the blue monsters have completely taken it over. There's possibly not a single puppet remaining in the cathedral, and possibly not a single human survivor. Refugees had come here at the start of the chaos to seek sanctuary and comfort, but the chances of any of those people still living are slim. The foyer isn't too bad. The seats are in order, the lights are still on, but the room past that? Ooh, something bad happened here, and what the hell is that thing? The puppet is going to have to follow it down into the underground guts of the cathedral, made possible by a massive hole in the floor. Did something break up through the flooring, or did it collapse in on itself? What comes next is a patience-testing series of trials defined by gravity and ambushes, the good old rafter climb. Narrow walkways, risks of falling into goop, getting hit from a distance by God knows whatever that is. He finds another of those Trinity-marked doors, but he doesn't have a key for this one. He'll take a mental note and revisit it when he does. There's a terrible note scrawled on a stone wall that says the Archbishop is dead, and those that still live must flee from the dead. The puppet and Gemini are able to piece things together a bit more, where these blue monsters came from, and what that puppet on the bridge meant by them being born from the petrification disease. But in all the history of Krot, the victims of the disease never got back up and started attacking like feral beasts, so what changed? The duo eventually reaches the St. Frangelico Cathedral Library and are met at the entrance by a woman's voice, a survivor. This is Cecile, the last survivor of the cathedral, which means the Archbishop truly has died then, and she has been infected with the disease. She asks the puppet for a kindness, to bring her the holy mark from the Archbishop's quarters. The halls up to his quarters are full of carcasses and falling cocoon-like sacks hanging from the ceiling. There's no way she could have made the trip herself. The diary of the Archbishop is near the puppet's destination, and it actually contains information about Cecile. Archbishop Andreas was concerned about her mental health and her safety. Something about her was dark, what he called a blood compulsiveness, and it contradicted her current faith. Andreas's heart too seemed to contradict parts of his own beliefs. He grew to hate the alchemists for their deeds in and around Krot, and he sent Cecile to the Isle of the Alchemists to steal something, some sort of a relic. But after he had it in his possession, his need to be a savior to Krot turned to despair. The reason for it, though, wasn't written down. Before the puppet goes back to Cecile with the trinket that she requested, he takes a trip up an elevator near the Archbishop's quarters and finds himself outside overlooking the still gorgeous sight of the valley and Krot. And a strange man, a stalker no doubt, is here too. He's wearing the mask of a hound and introduces himself as a proper, stuffy douchebag. This man calls himself Alidoro, the once alchemist turned vigilante, a hero of Krot, a treasure hunter, and all-around super famous awesome dude. Vanini, at least, was well-intentioned and enduring. This guy lacks self-awareness on how grating his self-aggrandizing is. But, irritating or not, he asks the puppet if he knows of a safe place that he can take refuge, and it would be cruel to tell him a lie, so the puppet directs him towards Hotel Krot. Alidoro will sell the puppet powerful boss weapons and items, should he obtain their ergo. For now, the two part ways, but they'll certainly be doing business together in the very near future. And Cecile is graciously thankful to the puppet for bringing her the items she requested. She says it will be a reminder to her of the quiet power of faith. And this is his last task here, before moving on to the next section of the cathedral. It's down a long hallway, beyond large doors, where he can hear organ music playing loudly. Beyond those doors is a broken-up room with a massive hole in the ceiling, from which that creature that he saw some time ago drops down. It seems to have the vague form of a human, but an insect-like body, with one giant wing on its right arm, and gold adornment all around its body. In truth, whatever it is, it's beautiful. It stares at the puppet for some time, retreats back up into the hole in the ceiling. Well, and then reality comes crashing down. This is what became of the Archbishop. This is what remains of Andreas. The relic that Cecile brought to him from the Isle of the Alchemists was the Arm of God. And it wasn't a sudden change, but it quickly began to alter Andreas. This wasn't the result of some elixir or disease, and it's amazing that the power of the arm didn't kill Andreas, but instead evolved him into something more than human. He believed himself to be chosen by God itself. When the exterior of the fallen archbishop is damaged enough, he emerges from his protective shell to directly confront the puppet, openly telling him that he is a one-winged angel. He yells curses to the arm of God, to all who caused the disaster within Krat, which he believes the puppet to be a part of as well. The death of the archbishop will free him from his delusions. By the puppet's hand, countless beings holding powerful ergo have died. And while he siphoned some of that ergo into the P organ, the majority of that ergo was not his to take. Fuoco, the parade master, Murphy, and now the mighty archbishop, their ergo, their essences, have been pulled away by the creation of Simon Manus, high atop the arch-abbey at the Isle of Alchemists. They have tipped the balance in his favor. He is creating a pure, concentrated form of all the ergo around Krat for himself, and every being the puppet destroys aids Simon in this. The man himself is back at the Arch-Abbey, watching it all take place, and through the memories of the ergo, he will know what has taken place at the cathedral. Back in the church, the dying archbishop gives a final confession to the puppet. It is a wish that he could go back to before all this happened, before the greed. Then he's gone for good. The puppet then ventures back to Hotel Krat to see if anyone can give insights into the disjointed things that he learned at the cathedral. Vanini doesn't have answers, but he asks him to help with a task, creating an ergo wavelength decoder that can find malicious signals within ergo wavelengths. He thinks that ergo has somehow been corrupted, and that the King of Puppets isn't actually behind the puppet frenzy. That would be far too clean of an explanation, and not even the king should have been able to do such a thing. Vanini holds no malice towards the puppet. It actually quite breaks his heart to see what's been happening to them. And then Eugenie. She is thrilled to see that Alidoro is here. She's run into him before. In fact, he saved her life. She doesn't say anything more about it, but does disclose that she is from a foreign land, the country of the morning, brought across the sea by her brother when she was a baby. She doesn't know her family. In her mind, they deserted her when she was little. Sophia talks with the puppet a bit about her surprise at monsters being in the cathedral. That they were supposedly born from the petrification disease confuses her as much as it did he. The disease turns you to stone, not into a monster. She's worried about the Malum district. It's very close to the cathedral. Could there be monsters there too? And Geppetto expresses confusion as well as to the events in the cathedral, calling it just tragic. He muddies the waters by putting forth that maybe the puppet frenzy and the disease are linked. Maybe the puppets can catch the petrification disease as well. It should be impossible, but so should the puppet frenzy. He's technically not telling any lies, but he's linking variables that can't be, and he's making himself a victim in a non-existent issue. He tells the puppet that his only wish for him is to stay a good boy with no resentment or lies. They need to find the King of Puppets, whoever that is, to stop all of this. The puppet must next continue on through the cathedral to the Malum district, to where the Black Rabbit Brotherhood has taken over. Once the frenzy began, the Brotherhood seized power and took advantage of the chaos. Even if it means taking down the Brotherhood, they need to get through that district. In the cathedral where Cecile once stood, he finds a letter addressed to him. It's her confession. She reveals that she was a sinner, a murderer, but the Archbishop saved her. Because of the mercy and kindness he showed her, she believed him to be a saint. After all, even saints succumb to wealth and power. He wasn't perfect, but no one is. The puppet has opened a way out of the cathedral by defeating the Archbishop, and she is going to take it. They will not meet again, but the puppet won't be far behind. As they walk the pilgrim's path beyond the cathedral, Gemini tells the puppet a bit about the area. This was once all there was of Krat. Before puppets, before Elysium Boulevard, before the factories were built, Krat was a tiny town in a valley near the coast. This place was left behind, becoming a slum of desperate people in dangerous alleys. And now there's evidence of opportunists moving into the area, the Black Rabbit Brotherhood. Although to what end isn't really clear. Everyone is dead or dying. There's no commerce to be done. Are they trying to rule over corpses and broken houses? There are many carcasses in the Malum district, and some of them are a cut above what was at the cathedral, which makes these slums a gauntlet of sorts. A note describes a doctor coming through to cure the people here during the outbreak. These people couldn't afford the miracle cure of Krot. That doctor walked with a cane holding strands of blue hair. Simon Manus. He has been here. He made sure these people changed after death, and he's likely already watching the puppet's movements. If not now, then certainly by the time he reaches the proper Malum district. The puppet and Gemini don't know any of this, of course. They're going to go on their venture through Krot completely unaware that Simon Manus will now be observing them from a distance. At the gates to the Malum district, the Black Rabbit Brotherhood makes their presence painfully, obnoxiously obvious. They send a massive carcass monster towards him, believing that it'll run him down, though they don't stick around to see it through. It will probably be impossible to make peace with these four. They're not like Red Fox or Black Cat or even Alidoro. They're power-hungry, greedy, and cocky. Speaking of, Red Fox and Black Cat are here, just inside the Malum district. And they're both pleasantly surprised to see him. He made it out of that factory after all. Fox asks if he wants to join up with them here to fight together through the district and relieve the Brotherhood of their hoarded treasure. The puppet agrees, as it could be nice to have extra company for a while. At least it seemed like it would be nice until Black Cat called him a dumbass under his breath. Suddenly not such a lighthearted teaming up. He's going to be fighting through the district while looking over his shoulder now to make sure that these two don't run him through. Thankfully, nothing so dramatic occurs. The puppet does most of the heavy lifting, acting more as a bodyguard than a co-op partner, and when the group comes across the mark of the Black Rabbit Brotherhood on a wall, implying that they're about to enter their territory, suddenly the Black Cat needs a break. The two of them are going to stay here in relative safety, while the puppet and Gemini go ahead to clear the rest of the district. One of the Brotherhood gets on a loudspeaker to announce that the being in their district is none other than Geppetto's puppet, and there is a financial incentive to bring him down. And again, who they're saying this to isn't very clear since there's just carcasses all around. There aren't even puppets to be seen. But maybe the Brotherhood is coping with everything happening by just playing pretend. So how old are these people? Partway through the Malum district, another phone starts to ring once he's close. It is the King of Riddles again. The puppet found one of those Trinity doors back at the cathedral. If he can get another key, he can backtrack some time and maybe go get some nice loot. Maybe a new set of clothes. The riddle this time is, I stand tall and proud when I'm young and bold, but I'm short and humble once I've gotten old. What am I? The answer being a candle. The King of Riddles playfully accuses the puppet of cheating and compares the puppet's brightness to that of a candle. But the King of Riddles concedes that he has won, so the puppet's award is the second Trinity key. There's still a long way to go through this district. There's another casual run-in with one of the Brotherhood who's just sitting around waiting for somebody to get caught in her trap so she can laugh at them. The fighting of the second half of the district feels easier than the initial foray, making for quick progress through the streets. Towards the end, the puppet and Gemini meet Red Fox and Black Cat once again, who are safely standing well above street level watching the goings-ons. Because of the puppet's fighting, they have made it farther into the district than they had hoped. So wait, these two are trying to get somewhere, but where? Their motives have been an entire unknown thus far. So what are they scheming? Black Cat asks if he's really going to take on the Black Rabbit Brotherhood, but neither of them offer to help in what they clearly recognize to be a very dangerous endeavor. They're content standing back to watch what happens. Beyond a courtyard gate just down an alley, the puppet finds their secret hideout. A lavish building they've claimed as their own once all of its inhabitants were gone. And though they're all masked, they're clearly young, amateurs and immature, which explains why their actions seem so chaotic and unnecessary. Individually, they would be easy picking for another stalker, but together, they're a force to be reckoned with. They greet the puppet with a coffin with the word liar written within. Somehow, they know things about this puppet. They've perhaps been watching him for a while, or someone gave them a heads up on the threat coming their way. The eldest of them leads the fight, being clearly the strongest and most formidable amongst them. Each of the Brotherhood will jump in to aid their eldest brother, and their dialogue makes it clear that there is some affection and a bond between them. If they're not blood siblings, then perhaps they're chosen siblings. But to the devastation of their pride, the puppet focuses in on the big guy and very, very quickly demolishes him. The death of the eldest brother stops the others in their tracks. This fight is over. Their spirits are broken. They collect the body of the eldest, take his weapon from the field, and while departing vow that this puppet will pay for what he has done. The hideout of the Black Rabbit Brotherhood is now his to explore and pillage. There are a few things lying around that show their immaturity and how they interacted with one another. They were a gaggle of youth who ascended to stalkers when the world fell apart, and together they were strong, but they took it too far by victimizing, stealing, and terrorizing to cement their reign. Apparently, they were also working for the Alchemists to get gold coin fruits from a nearby tree. Do they mean the gold coin tree from Legends is nearby? In the back room, while snooping about, the puppet and Gemini find a painting that looks just like the puppet, except a decade younger. It is just uncanny and such a vivid, nigh lifelike image, and on the back it's marked D. Gray, like as in Dorian Gray, the butt stuff opium aged in a painting, Dorian Gray? Geppetto might want this painting, if it's of Carlo when he was a boy, and maybe he can explain the D. Gray business. And the old man isn't far away. Up a lift in the back of the building, the puppet is taken to a large room where Jianzhou is waiting for him. He says that he is so happy to see him and that this supposed pharmacist has found the gold coin tree. It's just beyond those doors, and this building is attached to Hotel Krat, the subject of Jianzhou's desire. It was right there the whole time. But, he says, he cannot approach the tree. It resists him, repels him, it burned him. He says it must be because he has the petrification disease, but, well, Jianzhou looks pretty healthy for somebody who has the disease, and according to legends, the tree would repel those with greed in their hearts. So what is this gentle-spoken man's angle here? I mean, the puppet has no real reason to question him, so he'll continue to pick gold coin fruit as long as it's ripe, and he'll trade it to Jianzhou for valuable goods. The pharmacist will remain here for the rest of the puppet's journey. In the hotel, Antonia speaks of the tree before the puppet gets the chance. If he made it through the Malum district, that means he went past the tree. The Krat disaster brought infighting amongst the alchemists, so she decided to stop cooperating with them, and she sealed the tree away so nobody could fight over it. She didn't realize that the Black Rabbit Brotherhood was sneaking in to steal from it, though. The puppet has been finding strange lockboxes called cryptic vessels, special containers that can only be opened if you know the combination, but Vanini created these and he knows how to figure out those combos, so when the puppet finds them, he will crack them open so they can savor the sweet secrets inside. Sometimes they'll contain clues, other times letters or insights into people in the hotel. They're always worth hunting down and opening, and it's a welcome distraction for Vanini, who is starting to get a bit of cabin fever. And finally, the puppet speaks with Geppetto. He wants his son to go to Rosa Isabel Street, to strike at the heart of the problem. Find and kill the king of puppets. Maybe if he can kill the rebel king, the puppet frenzy will end. Antonia has the key to that part of the city. He just needs to swing by and pick it up once he's ready to venture out. And as for that painting, Geppetto commissioned its creation, and he's stunned and elated to have it back. He thought it was lost forever. And to think, his creation, his puppet, who he calls son, brought it back. He says it holds memories of a happier time, but Geppetto was a terrible father to Carlo. Is he truly thinking of happier times when he was neglectful and vacant, or is he lying to himself now too? Rosa Isabel Street is eerily quiet. This was once the entertainment district, a party row that never slept. Now it's just dead. It's not long until he's met with resistance. It's back to normal puppet fights at least. Gemini tells him a bit about the district, in particular a famous singer named Adelina Corday, who's probably gone now. Everyone that he knew from this district is probably gone, and it's a depressing thought through and through. There is an old woman still alive here, locked up in her house, clearly sick with the petrification disease. The puppet can do her a solid and track down a bottle of her favorite wine for her to enjoy in these final hours, which, of course, he'll do. Anything to help. The puppet slowly clears his way through the buildings and the streets, coming eventually to an amphitheater where music plays and a very deliberate setting has been established. He approaches the center, and a woman clad in white calls down to him from atop the stage, calling him a beautiful puppet. Her musically attuned ears can hear the springs in his body. She's been killing puppets and stringing them up here, and she would very much like to do the same to him in honor of the red actress Adelina Corday, her sister. This is Patricia Corday, who, like her sister, was a great performer, an actress and singer. But when a treacherous plot resulted in Patricia being poisoned and her voice ruined, she chose to become a stalker. And she is a magnificent sword fighter. With her life destroyed and her sister presumably dead because of the frenzy, this is what she chose for her final days. And this will be the last of them. The puppet kills Patricia Corday, the White Lady. Quite close by, up a covered walkway, is another living being, but this one is non-hostile, a man named Julian. Julian recognizes the puppet as a stalker, another human, and he asks the young man before him for a favor. He's lost his wife, and he knows that she's dead. They were separated during a fire on Rosa Isabel Street, and he couldn't reach her. He is deeply grieving the loss and asks the stalker to bring him back her belongings if he can find the body. She will be wearing a black dress. The puppet will of course do this for the man. Perhaps doing so will encourage him to escape this very dangerous city. They continue on their way through the district, eventually coming to the main row, and on a bridge overlooking it they can see patches of fire. The body of a woman dressed in black is nowhere to be seen, so they trek the back alleys and they come across a puppet wearing a black dress, and her only belonging is a wedding ring. Not even Gemini can muster up an explanation for this one. They look around the back pathways more, but this is the only woman wearing a black dress that they can find. They run and fight up Rosa Isabel Street, up to what looks to be a massive theater or an opera house, but they take a stargazer back to Julian before continuing on, to see if maybe there was some sort of a misunderstanding here. But the man immediately recognizes the ring as belonging to his wife Melody, the puppet. That puppet was his wife, and he openly admits to it. He says that he saw a soul shining within her, and he knew that she loved him too, yet he questions himself and his sorrow. Maybe he is crazy. The puppet could answer his vulnerability with a painful truth, that he's never seen such a thing happen before, or a merciful lie, that Melody left a message of love for Julian. He chooses to lie to ease the heart of the stricken man. He's already lost enough, why heighten his pain too? Besides, does the puppet himself not prove that they can be more than cogs and springs? Maybe Melody did truly love Julian. And to hear that she did moves the heartbroken husband. Julian asks him to remember the love he shared with Melody, and perhaps this young fellow too will find true love one day. That giant theater the puppet and Gemini found is the Estella Opera House. What few souls were here when the puppet frenzy began got nowhere near the exits before they were pulverized. But he manages to make it upstairs into a back room where he finds Adelina Corday, the sister of Patricia Corday, the White Lady. Oh, if she'd only known Adelina was still alive in the opera house. But she's sick. She has the petrification disease. She says a man, Riddles, told her that this place was a shelter. So did she get a call from the King of Riddles? He kinda seems the type to lie to a sick woman. She calls to her sister, Patricia, says that she's so sorry, and tells the puppet that she is parched. She would like to taste fruit again. He doesn't have anything for her to eat, but he does remember the puppet butler Polendina back at the hotel having an apple. As soon as he's able, he'll rush back to Hotel Krot and he'll get it for her. Getting through the entirety of the opera house requires using the side hallways and stairwells of the building, which are heavily patrolled by a variety of very interesting puppets. On a lower level, while looking for a way back up, beyond some rubble the puppet spots another Trinity door. He could reach it from a giant hole in the floor above him if he can find a way. He doesn't have the key, but he knows where to backtrack to when he does. After unlocking all the routes around the opera house, he quickly returns to Hotel Krot to purchase that tasty apple for Adelina Corday and runs it back to her as quick as a fiddle. She's almost irrationally happy to have the apple and loudly cries her thanks to him, and then asks if this apparent young man will hear her last confession. Adelina confesses that she coveted her sister's voice and that she was the one who poisoned her, who ruined her voice and career. She knew that it was wrong. She still loved her sister, but she did it anyways. Adelina Corday had to have it all. She'll die soon, alone in this room, not knowing that her grief-stricken sister too died this day, nearby, and that her last words were of Adelina. There is one more room that must be explored in the Opera House, the main theater. There's been no sign of the King of Puppets during all of this. Will the puppet even recognize him when the two meet? The main showroom is still intact. Tables are set up with chairs, a stage ready to begin a show. A spotlight shines down on one of the puppet actors, a puppet that looks like Geppetto, and in the seat next to him clearly is the puppet. This isn't what happened before the puppet woke up, though. This is something that hasn't happened. The Geppetto puppet lumbers towards the unconscious puppet in the chair and takes out his heart, his pee organ. Geppetto walks with it towards another puppet body nearby and places the pee organ into it. Slowly, the other puppet rises from the chair, raises its arms as though on strings, and then victoriously strikes a pose under the spotlight, while the Geppetto puppet claps in the background. Someone put this all together very deliberately, as though they know something that the real puppet doesn't. The question of, would the puppet even recognize the king, is instantly put to rest when he descends to the floor. There's no doubt here. This is the king of puppets. He smiles at the much smaller being before him, and he extends a hand to him in a very friendly way. But Geppetto told the puppet that the king was responsible for the frenzy, which means this being is responsible for so much death. He is no friend. The puppet rejects the king's extended hand, much to his sorrow. These two must and will fight. The king's 4 arms are hard to manage, and his great size lends to a long range on his swings. But while they twirl about one another, the king does try to communicate with the puppet, to tell him that he's wrong, to listen, to stop being silly, but the puppet just doesn't seem to understand, and even if he could, how could he possibly trust this being after all that he has seen and heard? He keeps up his aggression against the king until its body is broken and unable to continue the fight. But what the puppet perceived to be the king isn't actually the truth. The true king of puppets lies within. What he fought was just its shell. Though not as complex a creature, it's quite like him. An intricate puppet that had to have been built by a master. Vanini, Geppetto, is someone else making sophisticated puppets like them? This is Romeo, the king of the puppets. He says that he must kill this intruder to make everything stop, that there is no other way. Romeo is fully awake. He has his memories, and he recognizes his foe. It's Carlo, turned into a bastard puppet by Geppetto, just like what was done to him, but with far different intentions. Romeo was meant to be a tool to carry out the puppet frenzy and a scapegoat for Geppetto, but he rebelled against his creator. He knows the puppet before him holds Carlo's ergo, that his memories haven't been awakened. So despite the painful heat he feels throughout his burnt body, Romeo still tries to speak to his friend, to tell him that they're still bound by the Grand Covenant, to tell them who the real enemy is, that they need to act to save lives. He sent messengers into Krat to find him, all of which the puppet unknowingly killed. The puppet cuts down Romeo, the king of puppets, who he believes to be the driving force behind the puppet frenzy. But Romeo thanks him for giving him freedom. And all this time, Romeo had kept the necklace his friend Carlo had given him at their graduation. The puppet takes it, not realizing its significance. Gemini rejoices that now the puppet frenzy should be over. The puppets outside should have changed, and he encourages him to get outside to see if it's true. They run out back to see, and Geppetto is waiting. The old man is glad to see the puppet safe. He didn't want to lose his precious son, and he's proud that he got to see his son defeat the king. The puppets should eventually die out. They have no direction, no leader, no way to produce more puppets. But the petrification disease remains. He orders the puppet to go to the grand exhibition, where it is rumored that alchemists have developed a cure. He expresses his skepticism as to their science and motives, but if they do have a way to make a cure, it needs investigated. So, the two part ways. The puppet decides to take a quick trip back to Hotel Krat to see how everyone is doing, and he finds Antonia to be unusually quiet. She's more ill by the day, but she's always been dynamic and full of life. She sits before an old painting of herself as usual, and when the puppet approaches to stand beside her, the creature that looks so precisely like Carlo, she looks up and gives him a smile of sad eyes. The disease is on her face, spreading stone-like growths across her body. She tells him that she finds comfort in the memories of her youth. She was a young woman full of life who loved the world and the world loved her. She dreams of those days. Antonia asks the puppet if he sees any resemblance between her and the portrait, if she still has the beauty captured within it. It's an easy question to answer. He says, of course, which gives her an authentic chuckle. She gives him a life lesson to carry. Time and the memories that fill it are all we have. On his way to see Vanini, the puppet notices that Polendina isn't at his usual station, and there's a note there addressed to him. It asks that he meet Polendina out in the garden to discuss something. The puppet immediately complies with the request, rushing out to see what's the matter with Polendina, and the butler speaks bluntly with him. Under a dark night sky, while rain pours down, Polendina confesses that he has become self-aware. His ego has awoken. He doesn't know why, but it doesn't matter either. His only concern right now is for Lady Antonia, whom he has come to love. He will not tell her this, of course. That's not what this is all about. It's about her health. He cannot bear to watch her suffer this slow death. It pains him, too. And he asks if the puppet has ever heard or seen of a puppet loving a human before. The puppet tells Polendina of Julian and Melody, of the love Julian had for her. Knowing that something similar to Polendina has happened before lightens his heart. Puppets can love and be loved. The butler is content just being in Lady Antonia's presence, content just being in love. And finally Vanini. He's thrilled to hear that the King of Puppets has been defeated, but he sets his mind to ensuring that something like this can never be repeated. He does not believe that the king was truly the one responsible for the puppet frenzy. He was just the one giving them orders through Ergo. But if they don't figure this out, then something like this could happen again. They need more data. They need to get the Ergo wavelength decoder working. Now it's time to get back out into the city where the puppets are being really weird. They're despondent, depressed, some of them are outright weeping or punching walls. Gemini wonders if they can even function without the King of Puppets to guide them. They are still dangerous when aggroed, but this is overall a positive development for the city. It'll make the road an easier trek than it would have been otherwise, at least until they reach the Lorenzini Arcade, an indoor shopping area with dozens of boutiques. Probably would have been a really pleasant place to window shop at once upon a time, but now it's full of carcasses, victims of the petrification disease that rose from the dead. They've turned this place into an absolute death trap. And the carcasses are getting larger and more dangerous with each district he finds them in. He has to search almost the entirety of the arcade before finding a way to get through to the grand exhibition. There's lots of info to be found here about the Monad Charity House, about Lorenzini Vanini himself. They find that bottle of wine the old woman way back at Rosa Isabel Street requested. And once they finally have the items needed to get out of this place, a very familiar voice catches them in the hallway, coming from the Stargazer. It's Vanini, using Ergo wavelengths to communicate with him through the Stargazer. He figured this out by mimicking how he believed the King of Puppets spoke to the other puppets around Krot. It's like having a cell phone that operates on the essences of humans. And by doing this, he's heard things in the Ergo too. There is someone in the grand exhibition calling out for help. He's suspicious of it, but if an innocent person is truly trapped, then they have to help them. The arcade has been fully cleared. The puppet and Gemini are ready to face the grand exhibition. But first, they tend to old promises and check in on the hotel again. After seeing that wine delivered, the puppet gets back to the hotel, and Sophia catches his attention to tell him that Antonia's condition is getting worse. They all owe her so much. They're safe because of her. She's going to be locked inside her own body. It's cruel that someone like her would have to meet that fate. Sophia wishes for a miracle that could save them all, but before he goes, she mentions the painting that he'd found that's hanging in Geppetto's room, the one by Dorian Gray. She's been sensing changes within the puppets, and the painting seems to be reflecting those changes in a peculiar way. He really should go check it out for himself. It turns out, the painting is growing a wooden nose. Geppetto is kind of stumped by it too. The artist he commissioned the painting from was eccentric and claimed the painting could harbor living souls as though from a fairy tale. What oh what is causing its nose to grow like that, and will it eventually stop? Well, that's one you're going to have to go and figure out on your own. Before the puppet and Gemini take off for the grand exhibition, Sophia speaks with him again about the defeat of the King of Puppets. He shows her the necklace that he found on the king's body, and it gives her pause. It makes her wonder If she knew the king of puppets in life, could it really have been that Romeo? She doesn't say the king's name, but asks if the puppet is okay. He looks sickly. For a moment, the puppet hears a voice. It sounds like the king of puppets, Romeo, whispering a name to him. Carlo? His heart, his P organ, starts to beat louder in his chest. His hair grows longer, and Sophia watches this happen with her own eyes and says that he's becoming more than he once was. He's becoming more human. If he wishes to continue down this path, he just needs to keep behaving as a human does, making the same choices that he has been, remaining true to himself. It's time to get a move on, back to the Grand Exhibition. Had the frenzy not began, the Grand Exhibition would have showcased the new automated puppets of Krot, which would have stunned and changed the world. It would have drawn crowds from every corner of the planet into the city, and now it's patrolled and controlled by a variety of puppets, the finest technology in Krot. At least they're not carcasses, but some of them slap harder than a semi-truck. You know what's worse than a puppet with a sword? A puppet with a sword that can block or parry, or has chainsaws for arms. There are posters up about a fighter named Victor, the Hercules of Krot. Sadly, it seems that he fell ill with some sort of a disease, and this broke the hearts of his many fans. That was until he was cured, and he came back stronger than ever. Good for him. Had the Grand Exhibition taken place, he would have fought an automated puppet in front of a huge crowd. The sound of a phone ringing catches the puppet's attention. It's the King of Riddles. But during the call, his rhymes are a bit threatening. It's not quite so lighthearted, even though he speaks with the same energy and cadence as before. His question this time: think about this, whatever it takes. What cannot be used before it breaks? And the answer to this one is an egg. And the King of Riddles is thrilled that he got it right. He's proud. Before he departs, he asks the puppet if he is capable of breaking free from the shell that is his puppet's body. He makes him go searching around for the next key, and it's a testament to how much the King of Riddles must have really planned this whole thing out. Or he's actively watching the puppet's movements. The would-be fight arena will be his last stop here, yet he's not found anyone in need of saving. So where was that Ergo SOS coming from? Or was this truly a trap? There's not a lot of time to ponder it because there is a massive creature at the other end of this arena. It's not a carcass, it's not a puppet. It calls out a welcome, and this is a man. How can something human be this large? He speaks of evolution being made real here, and he introduces himself as Victor, the Hercules of Krot. He doesn't give the puppet much time to take this all in. He is eager for a fight and charges almost immediately. Something is being pumped into Victor via a machine on his back, and it sounds crazy, but it looks like pure ergo. Victor fell to a disease of some sort, most likely the petrification disease. Was this how he was healed? That means that ergo exposure doesn't always end in death. In concentrated forms, it can produce evolutionary results in some humans. He drank the Alchemist's elixir, survived the infusions, and this is what he became. He's still fully aware, in control of his thoughts, able to communicate. He says, "We are the reborn," implying that Victor is not the only human that this has successfully been done to. At the halfway point, when it's clear that Victor has taken significant damage, the ergo containers on his back completely empty into his body. The blue liquid brightens his veins, he glows from the treatment, ergo seeps from the tube latches on his head, and he shakes off all the dead weight of the equipment he was packing. Running from Victor is not a sound strategy at this point. Though he's quick and aggressive, the puppet's size makes him harder to hit. He can dance around and block Victor's moves to mete out high levels of damage, but if the puppet does get hit by Victor, it's gonna hurt. Ultimately, the champion Victor is brought down by the puppet, yet still he refuses to admit defeat. He refuses to be humble. His ego won't allow him to do it. It is another who delivers the killing blow to Victor. From a spectator's booth, a being clad in odd armor launches a spear through his body, killing Victor quickly. The killer turns and kneels. A man is approaching who claps for the end of the great show. A man with a cane holding blue hair in a bauble. Finally, Simon Manus is showing himself. Simon is very open about who he is, immediately giving his name and relaying that he's known Geppetto for a very, very long time. But Geppetto didn't see the potential in the petrification disease. Simon thinks that it can be used to strengthen mankind. Victor was a product of that thinking, and he asks the puppet what he thinks the cure is creating. The answer given is monsters. Not what Simon was hoping to hear, but he doesn't blame the puppet for speaking the truth as he sees it. He proposes that the petrification disease isn't death. It's the process of purifying a person's essence. And if a human can overcome the disease, they will come out stronger in mind and body, free of lies. He reveals to the puppet something that he didn't know before. The purified essence created from the disease is ergo. It's what's powering the puppet's body. That power source was once a human being. By getting people to drink a special elixir which turned them into carcasses after death, he claims they're helping them experience that purification. What an honor. He taunts and pokes at the puppet a bit more, but also extends to him an invitation to visit the Isle of the Alchemists, to witness the triumph of his creations and experiments firsthand. He could, of course, try to stand against Simon, but standing against evolution is surely exhausting and demoralizing. Well, at least he's not here to cause more problems. The bodyguard with Simon looks like bad news in armor, but the puppet and Gemini are allowed to continue on their way. The cricket chirps in that some literature they'd found mentioned Vanini going to the Isle of the Alchemists once. Maybe he can help them reach it. At the tram, the red fox and the black cat are hanging out. Just what the hell is up with these two? Fox very carefully chooses her words, but insinuates that they actually need the puppet's help with something. Black Cat isn't nearly as thoughtful and butts in with hopes that they haven't behaved too badly towards him before. But his apparent elder sister hushes him and says that her younger brother here has the petrification disease and that it's taking his eyesight. They've been doing work for the alchemists, and they provide just enough gold coin fruit to keep the cat's vision barely intact, but she wants a cure. His condition is keeping them indentured to the alchemists, and they're unreliable at best. She asks if maybe he has any gold coin fruit. It's a precious thing, but can they have it? They lay it on a bit thick, but it's not necessary. The puppet has been collecting fruit on a regular basis, so he has plenty to spare. This won't completely cure the black cat, but it will keep him going for a long while. They have another job from the alchemist to see to, so they can't stay and chat, but they do both genuinely relay thanks to the puppet and bid him farewell. They give Vanini a little ergo call on the tram and tell him about Simon's invitation. He's none too pleased that they're getting mixed up with alchemists now too, but, well, it can't be helped it seems. He does know of a way to get to the island, but he's not sure if the thing still works. He tells the puppet that they are going to need something, a special power source, golden ergo. But getting that will require going to a really unpleasant place. His butler, Pulcinella, informed him that such a thing may be found at the Barren Swamp, a sprawling graveyard of puppet parts, and it's going to be guarded by a literal monster. The tram will get them there, but they need to be ready for a very troubling journey. First, errands at the hotel. Vanini tells the puppet a bit more about the implementation of the Grand Covenant over a decade prior. Geppetto created it, and he saw it carried out. In theory, the puppet frenzy should be impossible unless someone tampered with it. Or, as he believes, there's something about ergo that they don't truly understand. After all, they still don't know where ergo comes from, they still don't understand why some puppets become self-aware, and that seems to be something that's been happening a lot more as time has gone on. The Grand Covenant was supposed to ensure no violence ever took place, theoretically even if their ego did awaken. So what the hell happened to change that? Does the Grand Covenant dissolve when their ego awakens, or did someone intentionally cause it? He's still not willing to buy that the King of Puppets actually caused all of this on his own. It's just too clean of an explanation for a problem full of complicated variables. The puppet tells Sophia about meeting Simon Manus, and she very carefully withholds the truth about her link to Simon. It seems like the only people in this hotel not dedicated to keeping secrets are Eugenie and Vanini. Sophia calls Simon's dream of evolution a delusion. He is the most dangerous man in Krot. He is the reason that she woke the puppet up. There's an old legend about the knight named Guillaume discovering the gold coin tree in the mountains, but Sophia says that in actuality, the alchemists made the tree by experimenting on listeners, people with powers like hers. Whether true or not, those are the sorts of deeds endorsed by the Order now. It has to end. The puppet drops by to see Geppetto as well. There are suspicions brewing within him that says the old man isn't being completely honest about, well, everything. This is the craftsman's first time seeing the puppet with longer hair, and he is surprised by the transformation. It was completely unexpected because it shouldn't be possible. All he can really muster is a reminder to be wary of dangerous people and to always be a good boy for him. Eugenie has been quiet for a while now, even though the puppet frequently drops in for weapon work or to chat. But this time, she asks him for a favor. She wants him to deliver a very finely crafted glove to Alidoro, the man with the hound mask. It's a 4-fingered glove. She says that he will understand the significance of it. Seems that he's gone out on an adventure and she would like for him to have it. Before he leaves the hotel, the butler Polendina tells him that Lady Antonia heard there was no cure to be found at the Grand Exhibition. Her health has since deteriorated, he believes, because she's losing hope. Polendina has heard tell of a particular alchemist that can create a cure, and he begs the puppet to seek this out for Lady Antonia. And there's somebody who's kind of on the puppet's suspicious radar. The guy who can't seem to approach the tree, who claims to have the petrification disease yet shows no symptoms of it, Giangio. Polendina said it would be an alchemist who would make the cure, and Giangio has been working on that. So the puppet sidles up and asks about how that's been going, and surprise, he has just the thing. Voila, Giangio has a cure. He warns, though, that it cannot undo the damage already done. It'll cure the disease, yes, but there's no way to restore Lady Antonia's health. The best it can do is make her passing easier and spare her the process of petrifying. The puppet takes it back to Polendina, who is thrilled to see that there is a cure, yet aches to know that she cannot truly be saved. So elongate her life with the cure, potentially causing more suffering, or let her fall to the disease, at least ensuring a quick death. It's a choice that Polendina cannot bear to make, so he asks the puppet to, and he chooses to give her the cure. They know what will take place if she dies to the disease. At least this way, come what may, there's a chance at a better ending for her. Polendina agrees and takes the medicine to personally see it administered to her. With time, they'll see if the choice made here was the correct one. For now, it's time to get a move on. There's a swamp to be conquered. There was no exaggeration in the warning about this place. It's sad, lonely, it carries an aura of abandonment. Because of the polluted soil, it's also wildly dangerous. The puppets here have changed because of the contamination. Gemini explains that the city actually tried to stop the illegal dumping taking place here of old puppet parts, but it got out of control and they suddenly had much bigger issues to tend to. There are puppet bodies, junk, and scrap as far as the eye can see, an almost unreal amount of waste put here out of sight, out of mind. Can't have all this trash on the clean, perfect streets of Krot, can we? And the burning, the air here must be toxic as hell, but the presence of a living person betrays that it's not impossible to survive here. The familiar voice of Alidoro catches the puppet's attention. He's talking about a bargain with the alchemists, and it somehow involves the people at Hotel Krot, which puts him square onto the suspicion radar, right next to Geppetto and Giangio. Alidoro tells him of a monster in the swamp that lives on the cliffs far away. It behaves like a crow, he says, gathering shiny things, like perhaps a golden ergo. Alidoro nudges him in that direction, saying that the puppet is a hunter and that monster is a worthy prey, so go show it what you're capable of. He really wants the puppet to kill the beast, and it's likely for very selfish reasons. But the puppet promised to see something delivered to the hound, so he gives the stalker that 4-fingered glove Eugenie made, and he is a righteous bastard about it. At first, he reacts with disdain and then becomes obnoxiously rude about how it doesn't even fit. It only has 4 fingers. It is trash to him. Alidoro is just too strange to ignore on this, so the puppet decides to teleport back to the hotel to talk to Eugenie about it. And she's not upset over Alidoro's rejection. She's confused. The Alidoro she knew was a hero, In fact, during a battle with the puppets, the workshop tower she worked in collapsed, and the Hound lost a finger saving her. If this man has 5 fingers, well, she's too polite and careful to outright say it, but it's clear that this man is an imposter. She asks the puppet to look into it, to find out more about this Alidoro. Alidoro doesn't have anything more to add back at the swamp, but there's sure to be more from this man later. Further into the landfill, the puppet meets a hopeful soul, a damaged puppet who is self-aware, yet he's happy to see someone else like him. His current situation isn't bringing down his spirits, but because he isn't bound by the Grand Covenant, the other puppets hate him. He wants to know more about feelings, what they mean, and how to express them. The puppet can return here once he's learned to express a variety of emotions, to teach his new friend all about them. The broken puppet's sweet and good heart is eager to hear all he has to say. After a while, it starts to look like people used to live here. And worse yet, the alchemists use these isolated, poorly people as experiments for their petrification disease elixir. They did so not intending to treat or cure them, they wanted them to change, to come back as something else. It was terribly cruel, and their old shacks are patrolled by carcasses now, rather than the puppets of the landfill. Once he's through that tragic setting, it's almost a relief to be facing off against amped-up puppets again. It is until something shakes the ground. It's not an earthquake, it only lasts for a moment, but it's certainly larger than an explosion, and its point of origin is far away. Gemini estimates that it's coming from Krot, and he doesn't hide his immediate fear that something is happening in the city. That huge shockwave was almost enough to make one forget what they were originally doing here. In their haste to get back to Krot, they run straight into the lair of the swamp monster they were hunting. No one, not even the centuries of the swamp, know where this thing came from or what it used to be. It was speculated to have been a broken puppet, maybe a bear with the petrification disease, or a sick creation of the alchemists. From time to time, it was observed building this nest and bringing toys here in the form of old puppet bodies. It used to play with them, but it was also seen sucking ergo out of the scraps. The graveyard became a feeding and a playground for it. It looks like it may have once been humanoid, but there's no humanity remaining. Once the puppet lands a series of heavy hits, it goes into a shell of armor, and it stuffs itself inside. It's clumsy, awkward, and unpredictable because of it. The puppet eventually does end this godforsaken thing, and takes from its corpse the golden ergo that Vanini believed that it would have. The puppet doesn't know what it's for, but this will somehow get them to the Isle of the Alchemists. Alidoro is just beyond the arena. He watched everything go down from a safe distance. He's not shy about saying the puppet did all the heavy lifting for him, just as he had hoped. He starts calling the puppet Alidoro's best bait, as though that's supposed to be funny. He's able to collect the treasure he was seeking from the pit, and proposes they return to the hotel to celebrate. This isn't evidence of him being a fraud, though, just an asshole. The cave system beyond the pit leads back to Krot. It looks like it may have been some sort of a worker tunnel series, but now it's just lined with trash, puppet parts, and frenzied enemies. Puppets are to be expected here, but what wasn't expected was the arrival of carcasses in the tunnel when Gemini and the puppet were close to Krot. This tunnel series should exit at the Krot Central train station, and there weren't carcasses there before, just a lot of pissed-off puppets. So what are they doing here now? There are more tremors and shakes as they run through the underground, not as powerful as that first one, but whatever started in Krot is still happening. When they emerge into the central station, it is full of carcasses of all shapes and sizes. Sophia contacts him via ergo waves to tell him that there's some sort of an ergo amplification coming from Krot Central Station. It has to be the work of the alchemists, but what exactly are they planning? What's going to happen to the city? Working his way through the train station takes the puppet back to the train car where he first woke up. It seems like ages ago now. The room he was assembled in has been relatively untouched since he was last here, but he notices something that he didn't before. A hole in the wall at the back of the train, poorly hidden by a privacy screen. Was that always there? Behind it is another car full of extra puppet parts and a letter left on a desk. It's from Simon Manus to him. Dear Geppetto's puppet, who will come to this workshop train, I'm really thankful to you. A workshop train hidden by Geppetto, isn't that something? If not you, how would I have found this place? Unfortunately for Geppetto, I have the ability to read someone's memories. In Malum District, I had a hunch. They thought that if they followed you, Geppetto's puppet, they'd find the relic he stole, and that hunch was right. The relic has been returned to our sacred place. Now that the stage is set, the doors will open. I know this is all confusing, but soon you'll learn everything. Thank you. You were a good guide. So now the puppet knows that Simon Manus has been watching him at least since he left the cathedral. When he showed himself at the Grand Exhibition, it was the puppet's first time seeing him, but not the other way around. They have been 2 steps behind this guy, and the puppet has no idea what relic he's talking about reclaiming. And hold up, Simon Manus can read minds? Navigating the station now is far different from before. Old areas are blocked off, new ones are open. He finds another door with the Trinity symbol on it. This makes the 4th door like it, so the King of Riddles should be calling again soon. And outside, there's no immediate signs of something having changed the city, except carcasses walking around instead of puppets. The puppet decides to get back to the hotel to make sure that nothing has happened, and thankfully nothing really seems amiss, and no one is particularly upset about the quakes. Vanini is thrilled to see him back unharmed and with that golden ergo. Vanini has a little secret, something that he made for the alchemists to use, a submarine. He figures that if it's still in the city, it's underground, in the relic of Trismegistus. Except he doesn't know how to get down there, and this is all assuming that the base and the submarine are still intact. But if anyone knew about that sort of thing, it would be Antonia. She had all sorts of powerful social connections. It's unlikely there has been a single city project that she is unaware of. The puppet stops to speak with Polendina the butler before visiting Antonia to see how her health has been. And Polendina is absolutely elated. The cure worked. Lady Antonia's happiness and spirit have been returned. Though the damage done to her body cannot be undone, and though she will eventually die from it, she's free from pain, free from the prison of the disease. She will have peace in these last days, and it's indeed something to celebrate. Polendina is humbled to feel this emotion, happiness for someone he cares for, love. And he's happy to just protect and be with her as best as he can. And the lady herself is truly in high spirits. She gets to have a proper look at the puppet, but does not call him such. She calls him child, a handsome gentleman. She sees the humanity within this being and celebrates him as a creature of flesh and blood. She knows that he made this possible for her, and even if she can't stand, she feels like she could dance. She makes him agree that if Krot ever has a ball again, he'll ask her for a dance. Whenever the puppet has come to see Antonia, he's practiced pushing keys and playing simple songs on the piano. In this moment of happiness, to cement this as one of the precious memories of life that Antonia has spoken so much of, he plays her a song. It's a simple one, yet it shows his progress, and to Antonia it may as well be a concerto. And this is something that he too will be able to carry with him for all the rest of his life. After their memory is captured and complete, Antonia gets down to business. That underground base for the alchemists, the relic of Trismegistus, it's accessible via the hotel. She has an elevator straight down to it. Before the petrification disease, before Simon Manus's violent takeover, she worked closely with the alchemists. She shut that down once she realized their corruption. They won't be able to reach the base unless the alchemists unlock the elevator from the other side, though. They'll need to find an alchemist that can get it open. She recommends that he continues his search through and around Krot Central Station. Alidoro has made it back to the hotel and is still his boisterous self. There's nothing overly suspicious about him, though. Nothing the puppet or Eugenie could use against him. In an effort to find something on Alidoro, the puppet tours the swamp one last time to see if maybe he dropped or did anything. He comes across another person wearing a smaller hound mask, somebody that he missed before. They're an extremely friendly explorer named Hugo. He plans his expeditions around the movements of Alidoro. Seems like he's quite the fan, and he wants to become like him one day. He's working on getting a heavy door open, though that will take some time to accomplish. Hugo knows a lot about Alidoro, and praises him confidently. Alidoro is not a thief. Alidoro is a methodical hunter. Alidoro is a consummate professional. Alidoro's information and treasures are unmatched. So recent rumors that Alidoro is wanted for fraud, theft, and assault are just nonsense. It must be an alchemist plot. He gives the puppet a wanted poster that he found of Alidoro, touting it as malicious propaganda. And he gives the puppet a cryptic vessel that he found. It's one of those lockboxes that only Vanini can open now. He has no use for it, so he gives it to the puppet. Seems like a really nice guy. So the puppet decides that he'll visit this young treasure hunter again later. Maybe he'll have that door open by then and they can do some delving together. Back in Krot Central Station, the source of the rumbling is finally made clear. Huge crowd minerals with ergo deposits have broken up through the ground. It's like they came alive and burst to the surface. Gemini says that this was where the Workshop Union's transportation hub was, and puppets were really intent on attacking this place when the frenzy began. Those basic puppets are gone now, replaced entirely by carcasses and puppets infested with ergo mutations, and the damage stretches through the entirety of the district. The large golden ergo nodes are so hazardous to be around that they'll kill the puppet outright if he remains too long. The collapsed workshop tower is now available to him. This is where Eugenie was trapped under rubble during a battle, where she was saved by the real Alidoro. It's now occupied by alchemists who have undergone barbaric mutations. Lady Antonia had said that they were snooping around the collapsed tower, but these aren't normal people. They don't know how to use words, they just roar and grunt. Some of them seem to have been fused with their equipment, making it hard to tell if they're machines, puppets, or really jacked up human beings. On the top of the tower is a horrifying creature called the Walker of Illusions. There's not much to know or say about her. She is a viciously powerful creature that screams when she attacks and can make copies of her body. Her brain has clearly been modified or infused with ergo, making her spectacular abilities possible. But her reasoning and humanity were lost in that process. It's a strangely sad creature that the puppet ends here. And a note nearby the Walker's room states that Victor, the Hercules of Krot from the Grand Exhibition, was not complete and that she may become the owner of the complete elixir. Obviously, the people of Krot were used for experimentation and ergo collection, and Victor was a cut above the rest, but who is she? And is she even more powerful than Victor? Could she be that warrior that killed Victor with the spear on the balcony? On an elevator, another tremble takes place, and Sophia reaches out to him via ergo waves to tell him that the hotel is under attack, they need help, and someone else is on the line listening in, Simon Manus. He can hear them and he applauds their little parlor trick. Manus recognizes the humanity forming in the puppet of Geppetto, and that it was ultimately born from telling lies. In his new world, he wants nothing but truths, as he dictates them to be. A being like the puppet will have no place in it. Until that world is made real, the puppet is an interesting specimen worth studying, though. Reaching the hotel is going to be rough. Gemini warns the puppet that something horrible is ahead, which is the parade master, completely overtaken by ergo mutations. It no longer speaks via ergo wavelengths, just screams and wails escape the massive hole in its neck. There's a sadness about this. Will the same thing have happened to Fuoco at Vanini Works, or Murphy, the police puppet at City Hall? The corrupted parade master is a bitter challenge, but once he's put down, the puppet has a clear run to the hotel itself. From the outside, nothing really seems amiss, which means the defense system wasn't activated. Either the intruders found another way in, or someone let them in. There are a number of shady folks that they've met in Krot that could be behind this. The interior of the hotel is a royal mess, and the only person the puppet sees is Sophia. She says that it was stalkers who did this. They took Geppetto with them. No one else has been hurt. They're all hiding upstairs, and then it hits the puppet. No one else has acknowledged Sophia, or spoken of her. She's down here alone. Everyone else took shelter upstairs, which means Sophia just landed on the suspicious radar alongside Alidoro, Giangio, Geppetto, and apparently every other stalker they've encountered in the city. It doesn't make sense that anyone would let Sophia stay down here by herself. Unless they were just, acting like she didn't exist. Sophia and Geppetto, more than anyone else, are supposed to be people that he can trust, yet there's been a consistent proof that they're not telling him the whole truth. Is it really lies that define humans? A lie by omission is still a goddamn lie. Is this really what he wants to be too? He's already told so many lies under the guise of doing good. Do they tell themselves the same thing? The crew barricaded themselves in Geppetto's office upstairs, and it's Eugenie who's at the door ready to throw hands at anyone who tries to come through. She relaxes when the puppet answers and lets him in. Lady Antonia leads the reunion with news that Geppetto is indeed gone. And the thought that someone would attack Hotel Krat never even crossed her mind, not even the Alchemists. She's game to do everything in her power to track them down because they have pissed her off. She reveals a secret of the hotel, where that elevator to the relic of Trismegistus is. It's where the intruders left from, so it will be unlocked from the other side now. That elevator is behind her portrait. She tells them to play a certain chord on the piano, and it will open. They can all return to their usual business around the wrecked hotel. Cleanup can happen later, and when he is ready, the final stretch awaits the puppet. Eugenie now openly says that Alidoro isn't the real Alidoro. The hotel security never activated, and he is the only one missing besides Geppetto. He's clearly the one that let the stalkers in. She wants to know more about who the real Alidoro was, but that is a curiosity that she can let lie if the puppet can't find any more information. Vanini admits that when frightening things happen, he freezes up and he can't respond. He's pretty hard on himself over it. All the information the puppet has collected on foes should be enough to complete the Ergo wavelength decoder. He can now really start deciphering recordings of the King of Puppets speaking. Then maybe they can figure out what really happened to cause the puppet frenzy. After all, the tragedy of Arlecchino cannot be repeated. Wait, didn't the King of Riddles say his name was Arlecchino back when he first met the puppet? He starts to open up a bit more about his tragic past, but he's not yet ready to speak about his parents. Arlecchino, the King of Riddles, was already a little bit unsettling, but now he is also on the suspicion radar. And it has something to do with Vanini, of all people. The puppet has another cryptic vessel for Vanini to open, and this one shows where that young treasure hunter Hugo was, back in the swamp. Apparently he was right, there is treasure behind that gate. The puppet heads back to quickly see how Hugo is doing with getting the gate open, and surprise, he's succeeded. He says the cave is a bit too deep for himself to explore completely, but he is going to continue his venture in following the steps of Alidoro. He is going to search out the relic of Trismegistus. Beyond the gate is a small village built into the rocks of the mountain. This place also fell victim to the petrification disease and the elixir of the alchemists. The great journalist Medoro came here in his final hours, knowing that he too was sick and soon to die. He grieved the people that he'd lost, what was going to happen to Krat, and that his life was soon to end. He and the real Alidoro discovered the truth behind the alchemist's schemes, and they tried to tell the world, but nobody believed them. He was disgraced by slanderous accusations instead. There's no hint in his writings about what happened to Alidoro, but it's almost a certainty that the legendary vigilante is dead. The puppet concludes his explorations. It's time to see what's under Hotel Krat, time to inspect the relic of Trismegistus. As Lady Antonia instructed of him, he plays a special chord on the piano, and the portrait of the lady pulls back to reveal a secret elevator to the underground base. The doors are no longer locked, so the puppet and the cricket descend into the darkness with no idea what to expect. It is an eerily quiet place. Gemini chirps up that he has the strangest feeling, like he's been here before. Maybe before he was in this cricket puppet body, but he can't remember details, it's just déjà vu. There are signs that somebody was dragged through this base recently, evidence that Geppetto at least didn't go willingly with the stalkers. The hostile puppets down here are tough brawlers, but at least they're not carcasses or ergo infused. What is truly surprising is there's a phone down here, and it's ringing. It's been a while since they've talked, but the King of Riddles is on the other line. He's his usual cheery, slightly threatening, energetic self, and he has another riddle for the puppet. This blue flower has many ways to take root, but only on man does it ever bear fruit. This one seems like a freebie or maybe a bit of a taunt. The puppet answers ergo, to the joy of the king. He acknowledges that, yeah, he speaks in veiled threats. Metaphors are a useful human creation to hide terrible truths. After all, it's not truly a lie if filtered through wordplay, right? But he has another question for this call. It's not a riddle, just a rhetorical question that he has for the puppet. Ergo doesn't appear out of thin air, so where did the puppets get all that ergo? If Geppetto is to be believed, it's the King of Puppets that ordered the puppet frenzy, so the puppets got all that ergo from the alchemists and then the King of Puppets. But humans seem so prone to lying, don't they? That's not the whole truth, is it? And the puppet may not have all the pieces to the puzzle yet, but he knows enough to be suspicious of the people around him, including Sophia. And the King of Riddles may be a lying, deceitful bastard, but why lead the puppet astray when the truth is just so devastating? A young man once told the puppet that he would pay for what he'd done after he killed the eldest brother of the Black Rabbit Brotherhood. The 3 surviving members hate the puppet. This is a very personal affair between them now. The Brotherhood was part of the attack on the hotel because they struck a deal with the Alchemists because they couldn't bear to let him go. They're not here to play with their food. They have weapon enhancements at their aid, and the 3 surviving Black Rabbits attack together from the very start. They absolutely batter the puppet, repeatedly forcing Sophia to intervene to rewind time. It takes luck and returned aggression against the 3. He has to zerg them down one at a time, and he's doing it on a clock, because eventually, Big Brother wakes up. This was a part of the deal made with the Alchemists. They aid in attacking the hotel, they're indebted to the Order, but the eldest was brought back, much like how Victor was at the Grand Exhibition. That he's so changed doesn't matter to the others. What was lost has been returned. Before the eldest is into the field, 2 of the younger ones are cut down, and the 3rd falls shortly after, leaving the ergo-infused monster to continue its fight. It's not clear how much of the original eldest brother remains, how much came back with him after his death, but here will be his second and final. The entirety of the Black Rabbit Brotherhood is wiped out in the relic of Trismegistus, and the only one to witness and remember are the puppet and the cricket. He takes a moment to return to the hotel to just decompress from what took place. Vanini has finally finished the ergo wavelength decoder. He reminds his young friend that the other puppets in Krot were communicating with each other via ergo wavelengths, and now they can listen in. The 2 of them listen to a message from the King of Puppets, now able to understand his words clearly. He calls the puppet Carlo, and says the laws of the Grand Covenant bind those like him, which makes them his puppet. He reminds Carlo of the first law: they must obey their creator's command. Then he tells him of Law 0. The creator's name is Giuseppe Geppetto. But the name was something that Vanini couldn't hear. It was coded for Carlo, for the puppet. He asks the puppet if he heard the last part in the static, and he can choose to lie here, should he wish to do so. It would protect Geppetto, it would keep the blame on the King of Puppets, but he chooses not to do that. He tells Vanini of Law 0, and the inventor immediately pieces together what this all means. Vanini has known Geppetto most of his life. He trusted him completely. He believes that Geppetto is the force behind the puppet frenzy, but why would he do this? Though he's clearly disappointed and shocked, he's relieved to have finally gotten the answer he was seeking. They've identified the problem, now they can find a solution. Vanini calls him back before he leaves, because he wants to tell him something, the truth of his past. His parents were murdered in front of him when he was a child, yes, the authorities called it a mugging, but in truth, it was a puppet with an awakened ego that killed his folks, Arlecchino, who the puppet knows as the King of Riddles. Arlecchino was playing a game this whole time. The puppet's instincts were correct when he felt that there was something just off about the king. That event is why Vanini is the person he is today. It's why he made the professional choices that he has. He wanted to make sure nobody ever felt the pain that he has. And that life vision was ruined by a dearly trusted friend, Geppetto. He refuses to give up, though. They will figure this out, and they will fix it. He gives the puppet the decoder, and says he can use it to hear the true words of the puppets, and anything else the King of Puppets may have left for him at the Stargazer. And there, alone, he listens into the King of Puppets' words, and learns that his name was Romeo, and that he is Carlo. Romeo and Carlo grew up together. They were best friends. As the King of Puppets, he was able to rebel against Geppetto's orders. He was doing everything he could to fend off the disease and stop the Alchemists. He tried sending messengers, but the puppet, Carlo, unknowingly destroyed them all. There's no reason for them to fight. He can't undo his mistakes. He can't bring Romeo back. But he, Carlo, can move forward now knowing the truths obfuscated by the lies of the one who was supposed to care for him the most. But he's not hollow in his existence, despite the betrayals of his father. He has the good hearts of Lady Antonia, Eugenie Vanini, and the awakened puppets Polendina, Pulcinella, and Gemini to act as his guides. And maybe one day he'll get back the memories he once had of his friend Romeo. But, as Vanini said, they won't know why Geppetto did what he did until they save him. It's back to the underground to find a way to reach the Isle of the Alchemists. Carlo knows what anger is. He saw it in Lady Antonia after the attack on the hotel. He understands what it feels like, and when he sees the false Alidoro, anger boils up. The stalker recoils in fear when Carlo appears. He knows he's been mucking with the wrong people and begs for his life to be spared. He quickly spills that the Red Fox and Black Cat have Geppetto. They've taken him ahead to the Isle of the Alchemists. There's a submarine at the docks that he can use to get there as well, if he can power it, something that Venini has already seen taken care of with the Golden Ergo. The false Alidoro says that he betrayed the people at the hotel because, well, he didn't care about them and he wanted to move on and up in the world. And he just found Eugenie to be so annoying. It's true, he's not Alidoro. He was the famous vigilante's partner, Parrot. Parrot stole some valuables from Alidoro to pawn. The two argued about it, and Parrot killed the real Alidoro. He says he had to kill him, a tactic used by abusers and cheats to make it seem like they had to do something to their victim. It was their own fault that they got hurt. He even has the nerve to try calling his story a tragic tale. Parrot picks up that Carlo has a murderous look about him, but taunts that he can't hurt him. He knows that this being before him is Geppetto's puppet, and the Grand Covenant forbids it, so go pound sand, idiot. Well, imagine his surprise when Carlo does cut him down. Parrot, a liar, a thief, and murderer. Good riddance. From his body, Carlo takes a strange cryptic vessel. This must hold more secrets about the real Alidoro. Eugenie might be interested in seeing its contents. Carlo and Gemini reach the docks, but rather than going straight to the island, they take a trip back to see what's in the canister. Venini is excited by this one. This vessel is a brand new design that he's never seen before, and he gets to crack it open. Inside is a letter addressed to Eugenie. It's the truth of who Alidoro was, who he was in relation to her. He was her big brother. He was there to save her from the destroyed workshop tower because he was watching over and taking care of her from afar. He stayed away to protect her from his mission, to reveal the truth behind the alchemists. He abandoned his real name to further that distance, and she too was given a false name when he gave her up. Eugenie was not her birth name, but the letter ended before he could tell her who she was. Carlo gives Eugenie the letter, and she takes it surprisingly well. She believes the contents of it, but she asks for time to process it, which is completely fair of her to do. Carlo and Gemini will be sure to return at least one more time before the end of their journey. For now, they get to ride a submarine, just the two of them. With the Golden Ergo fueling it, it takes them straight to the island. That sort of arrival won't go unnoticed, though, and someone is already on the beach, waiting. It's Sophia. Finally, it's her turn to tell truths. As Carlo may have expected, the Sophia at the hotel wasn't really her. Her body is in the upper level of the Arch Abbey, here on the island. Simon has been using her as a tool, causing pain so intense that her soul split into pieces. All this time, she guided him not to save Krat, she says, but to save herself. And while she sees it as selfish, when exposed to constant, unrelenting, indescribable pain, who wouldn't search for and enact a solution? She doesn't want Carlo to try saving her, though. She wants to be freed from her body to finally be given peace in death. If he wishes to know, Sophia will tell him of her father, of Simon Manus's ambitions, of the spread of the petrification disease and what it truly does to its victims, even the nature of her own powers as a listener, and how she came to control time. Sophia answers many of his unknowns, and once the questions are satisfied, this is where her guidance ends. On this beach, memories are made tangible because of how much ergo there is all around. Carlo will regain small parts of himself here, some of his own memories from life. One is from when he was a small boy, right after Geppetto dumped him off at the Monad charity house. A young woman there, possibly Sophia herself, encouraged him to go meet another boy, an orphan named Romeo. At the next memory, the boy, Romeo, takes the initiative for introductions. He asks if Carlo is training to be a stalker too, and proposes that they practice together. From then on, they were best friends. The next ergo memory is from some years later, when the two young men were graduating. Carlo's father didn't show up for it, and he expressed hatred towards the old man. Romeo reminded him to be thankful that he has any family, but the arrival of a stalker distracted them both. At the next, Carlo is speaking to that legendary stalker asking for training, but she brushes him aside as an annoyance and orders her attendant Gemini to get rid of them. At the final memory, the lady stalker stands over the body of Carlo. Carlo, Romeo, Sophia's parents, everybody on the premises was killed except Sophia herself, who was taken prisoner by Simon Manus to the Isle of the Alchemists. The Arch-Abbey of the Alchemists is larger than any structure seen in or near Krat. Not even the cathedral can compare in size. Just approaching the gate is a health hazard, as the defenses here mean business. Carlo has to beeline past everything just to have a chance at reaching the main gate, and once he's there, he has to deal with a massive gimmicky asshole who has the clearance he needs to open doors. Once on the proper grounds of the Abbey, Carlo and Gemini see what happened to the alchemists themselves. Carcasses and monsters, all of them. Religious propaganda etched into stone speaks of evolving, of greeting a god who will resurrect atop the Abbey. This place is an odd mix of science, religion, and magic. That curious mixture didn't cause all of this, though. Unchecked ego and greed did. It very quickly becomes apparent that there will be a point of no return here, so partway through the fighting climb, to just take a break from things, Carlo and Gemini return to the streets of Krat a final time to see if there's any unfinished business. He'll save the hotel for last, as it's certainly going to be a hard place to walk away from. While checking the corners of the city, Carlo hears a phone ringing. Arlecchino is calling. Knowing the absolute chaotic evil that this being is capable of alleviates the uncertainty that comes from trying to interpret his tone. On this final call, he wants to hear a confession from Carlo. He wants to know if Geppetto's puppet is a killer. Only a yes or no is allowed. Carlo has killed the Mad Donkey, Patricia Corday, the entire Black Rabbit Brotherhood, the false Alidoro parrot. Intentions aside, yeah, he is a killer. And Arlecchino is thrilled to interpret this as the two being kindred spirits. As he says, the spilling of blood is one of life's pleasures, and can Carlo deny that each death he caused was a thrill of sorts? There's no shame or embarrassment to be had in the confession. He gives Carlo his final key, the Chosen One's Trinity key, with a promise that this will not be the last time they speak. If he can find Arlecchino, the serial killer, he might find answers for Vanini too. The last place the killer puppet could be is the Arch-Abbey, so Carlo heads back to search the lower levels for a door his new key will open. The fight to get through this godforsaken place is a bitter one. There's evidence of sin and wrongdoing all over the place, confessions left behind to detail things done to puppets and humans alike. They were trying to achieve immortality here, and studying how to force mankind into its next evolutionary stage. They were monstrous long before their bodies transformed. Carlo and Gemini slowly make their way through each level until they find, purely by chance, a door with the Trinity symbol on it. And beyond that door is a wrecked room with a twitching puppet in the corner, wired into cords within the wall. It's not hard to tell that this is Arlecchino. His legs are destroyed, a weapon has been plunged into his chest, and he doesn't acknowledge Carlo's presence until he's right in front of him. Good. This is exactly the condition a dangerous creature like him should be in. Arlecchino welcomes the puppet of Geppetto with rather crude words, asking how his trip here was, if it was a bloody affair. He's not done with his questions. He has a few more up his sleeve. But at the forefront is a question he's dying to know the answer to. Are you a puppet or a human being? Which one are you? Carlo answers truthfully. He believes himself to be human. And with that humanity comes all the flaws and inconsistencies of a messy life. Reality is a far cry from the perfection of a fairy tale, and Carlo has embraced it. This is precisely what Arlecchino was hoping to hear, that Carlo believes himself to be human, because the King of Riddles also sees himself as such. They live, think, love, hate. That their essence is trapped within the prison of puppetry was a part of Arlecchino's reasoning for killing humans. He was seeking revenge. It's, of course, just excuses to justify his actions, but he doesn't deny that it was also just so much fun for him. In exchange for all of his cooperation, Arlecchino answers Carlo's questions patiently. He tells him he was able to call because, well, there's a goddess at the top of the tower, hooked into the machine up there, and he was able to plug into its cords to just borrow some of her power. That machine is absorbing all the ergo and Krot. And of all the people Carlo has helped, that goddess is certainly one of the most worthy of aid. His phone calls and rhymes helped him focus his mind away from his unceasing desire to kill things. And as for his serial killer past, he rather views his work as that of an artist, not a murderer. After he killed the parents of Lorenzini Vanini, he came here to continue his spree, quite unsuccessfully. He dragged and hid himself away here, where he's been alone for years, savoring the memories of his kills. He's not shy in talking about Vanini, either. He sees the man Vanini as a credit to himself. He allowed the boy to live out of curiosity, and look at what he's made of himself because of it. Arlecchino decides that he can give back the souvenir he took all those years ago from Lorenzini, the warrior toy his parents were making for him. Carlo will take this back, but he will not let Arlecchino remain alive. He is way too dangerous, even like this. The world will be a better place without the King of Riddles around. And not far from Arlecchino's death site is the Black Cat. He's standing guard over the path, but seeing Carlo's familiar face surprises him. It's so impressive that he made it all the way here by himself. And though there was potential for a friendship between them, he says that he is not letting Carlo get near his sister up ahead. He's a bit of a manipulative bastard still, but he says that he'll let Carlo through if he gives him a gold-coined fruit to prove his willingness to be friends. And Carlo hands one over, no problem. He knows that these fruits are the only thing keeping the petrification disease from claiming the Black Cat's eyesights. If he wanted one, he could have just asked for it and had it. Black Cat doesn't fully trust him yet, but he likes him. He's tired of fighting to survive, of being controlled by the alchemists for a piece of a gold-coined fruit. It's not living, and when will it end? He promises that he and his sister are going to get out of Krot, they're going to find a permanent cure for his eyes, then they can live as a proper family. He also promises that Geppetto is safe. They were never going to hurt him. The end is finally and nearly in sight after what feels like hours of climbing the abbey. Carlo comes to a bridge, crossing over the tallest point in the tower, where a guardian is waiting for any who might intrude. It's the being that was with Simon Manus at the Grand Exhibition, the one who drove their spear through the champion Victor when he refused to admit defeat. Their attention and ire is now turned on to him. Their name is Laxasia, and they are unlike anything Carlo has seen or faced before. Not even the Hercules of Krot could compare to their strength and speed, but unlike Victor, there is an intelligent control and pacing to their actions. They're clearly the product of some sort of alchemist experiment, a human who was made to be more than they once were, and they surely must be the finest thing ever created by them. It takes Carlo several repeated tries to whittle Laxasia down, but their first knee is far from their defeat. Laxasia will fight unbound from the confines of thorned metal armor. She casts her casing aside and uses her weapon as a lightning rod, absorbing every bit her sword and her body can withstand for the fight to come. She has sworn to protect this tower, and she intends to do just that. Only a proper death will stop her. Laxasia was known as Adriana in life, an alchemist, a zealot, and a keeper of Simon Manus's words. She was chosen to be the first of the alchemists to be baptized in their elixir, and it changed her into this, the first whole being. She was reborn, renamed Laxasia, and she served as the guardian of Simon Manus. Laxasia was deemed perfect, save one flaw. She had feelings for someone which could not be erased. When the alchemists wrote and spoke of evolution, this was their greatest representation of that desired change. But with the aid of the listener and the collected ergo of all the enemies that came before, Carlo is eventually able to kill this nigh-perfect being. But this battle accomplished what was needed for Simon Manus. Time. It bought him time. Some sort of event begins atop the tower, and as Laxasia's life fades, her last words are to him, that he was the only one for her. Crossing the bridge into the final tower takes Carlo to another heartbreaking and unexpected sight. It's Sophia, the real Sophia. This is what Simon did to her. He strapped her into a chair, connected her into his machine, and used her powers for himself until the pain became so consuming that her mind and body shattered, and she isn't dead. She can't die. She can't even free herself from this. This is where she truly wanted Carlo to go all along, and she begs in short sentences for him to set her free from this. Gemini is horrified by this sight and is unable to compute how they're supposed to handle this. But Sophia was very clear before to them. She wanted to be set free. He chooses to give her peace, and Sophia thanks him for all this kindness, and she asks him to take her ergo, her pure essence. Her body may be gone, but she can be with them until the very end. This choice has finalized something within Carlo. His hair once again changes. His heart beats loudly to accompany the warmth of his body. He really and truly is alive now, self-aware and feeling. Cogs and springs don't matter. This is his last chance to go back to the hotel, to have his final conversations, to maybe silently say goodbye to everyone. The explorer Hugo has made it to the hotel. He explored the relic of Trismegistus, found the elevator leading up to the hotel, and thankfully this is where he's planted himself. He found Alidoro's body, presumably dead from some grand heroic deed. He took the hound's gear and has decided to continue his legacy. But the story he continues will be of the good, true Alidoro, not the fiend parrot. Carlo takes the warrior toy back to Vanini, who recognizes it right away, and he knows that Carlo has met Arlecchino. The inventor tells the young man the story of his parents' death when he was a child and the guilt he's harbored from it. He's always blamed himself for what happened to them, and then he admits that he's so envious of people like Carlo that are so naturally strong. This is closure for Vanini, something that is long overdue. Eugenie is ready to talk about her brother, Alidoro. She's taken every necessary step to prove the letter's authenticity, and now she's left to wonder why her brother made the choices that he did. Eugenie truly wanted to meet her real family one day. It seems like she's the only one left now. Upstairs, Lady Antonia is gone. Her chair is empty. She must have felt so much better that she's walking around the hotel. But there's a note on her chair, addressed to him. It's a message of fondness and thanks. The young gentleman who resembles Carlo was a light to her and gave her back her joy in her last moments. He confirms it with Polendina. Lady Antonia has passed away. He says that she did so seemingly at peace with no pain, yet for him, he feels that pain has swallowed him whole. He plans on erasing it all, reverting himself back to a normal puppet, and he will be doing so quite soon. This will be their last conversation. And Pulcinella quietly calls out to him, asks for a word. This coy son of a bitch is self-aware too. He has been for at least 20 years, since Vanini was a child. Of course, Vanini is aware of it. The duo decided to keep it a secret so Pulcinella wouldn't be taken away. After his parents died, they were all each other had. Pulcinella has seen the strength in Vanini that the man has never realized was there, but too has he seen the damage that Arlecchino inflicted on his soul. At least now he's free from it, and Pulcinella is so very grateful. He gives Carlo a gift from the heart, and promises that whenever Carlo comes to visit their home, they will be rolling out the red carpet. It's time for him to move on, to complete his climb in the Abbey to face Simon Manus. He may never see these people again, but he can depart knowing that they're going to be all right. This is the most difficult stretch of the journey, as every stairs, path, scaffold is patrolled or camped by exceptionally powerful beings. It's further complicated when part of the way up, he encounters Red Fox. Her little brother had asked Carlo to leave her in peace, but he has to speak with her about Geppetto. Her job was to kidnap the old man, and she's blocking Carlo's path. She and her brother have been controlled by the Alchemists for so long that, say he was to help her find a cure for her brother's eyesight, they might suddenly find themselves in a different story altogether. She doesn't want to fight, it's a hassle, it's dangerous, and she doesn't want to do it for the Alchemists. If Carlo can give her another gold coin fruit, it would be enough to cure her brother, and they, in true gratitude, they would step aside. They would vanish from Krat. Carlo knows that Red Fox has done this for her family, because the Alchemists feed them scraps of gold coin fruit to keep them indentured. He has no hard feelings against them, and he gives her what she asks for. She's genuinely humbled and thankful for it. Not only will this save her brother's eyes, but it sets them free. They'll leave Krat, and just like Black Cat wished, finally they'll get to be a real family. As for Geppetto, he is just up the hallway in a cell, and he starts in with his precious son, good boy language as soon as Carlo has the door open. He bemoans teaching the puppet violence, yet he is going to ask for more of it. This is the last time, he promises. He quite boldly asks of Carlo what he thinks of Geppetto. Was he a trustworthy father? The response being simply no. Geppetto may feel remorse for asking his creation to do violent things, but it hasn't stopped him from asking for more, and Carlo knows that he was the one behind the frenzy, even if Geppetto isn't aware of that fact. The Black Rabbit Brotherhood was more honest than this man. Geppetto knows he was a bad father that inflicted loneliness on his son. He views that as his burden to bear, as though he were somehow a victim in all this. He promises to give back to Carlo the happy family they once were, but they never were a happy family. Geppetto is lying to himself too. Carlo and Gemini continue on to face Simon Manus at the top of this damned tower. He is ultimately the greatest threat to what remains of Krot now. He's a threat to the entire world. The higher they go, the more saturated the air becomes with ergo. Gemini remarks that it feels like they're near a mountain of dead puppets. After a series of bitter battles, they reach the top and find it to be a gorgeous oasis amongst all this dread. It overlooks all of Krot and the surrounding mountains, a most wondrous sight. Simon left a confession on the table here, certainly meant for Carlo to find. It's a bit of his story, how he came to be. He was experimented on, changed by his father using vast amounts of ergo in the early days of their experiments. It turned him into a creature that could read minds and memories, but that was no blessing. His father abandoned him, and it created an obsession in him for truth, for a world where no one can betray you, even if he has to force that world. And who doesn't long for safety, for understanding, especially from the ones they love, the ones who are supposed to give those things? Who hasn't felt the betrayal of a lie, of an omitted truth, the unfair casting of blame, of abandonment or judgment? But where Simon faltered was forcing his beliefs. That led to so much suffering for all around him and himself. In order to enact this forced change, Simon Manus had sought godhood by extracting, purifying, and injecting mass amounts of ergo into himself. This is the being that it created, something hardly recognizable as human. But his eyes, it cannot be denied. He is so consumed by hatred. He stands to face Carlo, and the mutations of his body are grotesque, yet he calls it magnificent. He calls it distilled immortality, and the key to a world with no lies. He will surpass even God to achieve this world, and he demands to be worshipped as such. The way this god-to-be moves is far from the beauty one might expect. His small legs are spread far to support the weight of his gigantic upper body. His proportions seem almost comical when put together. He's mobile and dangerous, but he's slow and clunky. He only has one arm to swing his weapon with, which makes for a slow wind-up and an even slower recovery. It's not much effort to destroy Simon Manus, the arm of God, but he knew this was coming. This whole affair is a bit laughable. He tells Carlo that it's time to discard this fragile body, time to evolve, time to grasp the power of a true god. On the back of Simon Manus is a most fascinating thing, a cocoon growing a new body. Like ergo transferred into the body of a puppet, this is a new husk of a new god meant for himself, grown from his own arm. It's time to use the arm of God to call down the power of the ancient god from the stars, to take it into himself. This is the new god of this world. Now, with 2 arms and the abilities of a god to call upon, Simon Manus is a force to be reckoned with, and he knows it. He taunts Carlo as they fight around an enclosed arena. It doesn't matter how near or far he stays, Simon has attacks that will reach him. It forces him to stay mobile and focused on the gods' every movement as they go. And this is a long, drawn-out affair. Sophia is forced to intervene 15 times before he makes it through the maddening endurance test, before he ends the sad, short reign of a would-be god. Before death takes him, Simon acknowledges that it was Sophia who truly decided the winner here. By giving Carlo as many tries as was needed, it took away any chances that Simon had. He doesn't know if it's because she cares about Carlo or if it's just pure contempt for him. He doesn't consider that it could be neither, that she's done it for herself. But Simon did once have a fondness for Sophia, and asks Carlo what did he do to her. There's no reason to lie here. He tells Simon that he gave her peace, which, yeah, that's not surprising. She knows what she's doing. She's made her choices carefully. Sophia gaining peace will ultimately lead to a happily ever after for her. He knows that. He admits that he once did care about her, that he did once want her, but that was a long time ago. He chose to pursue this life. He's fine with this ending. But he warns Carlo to watch out for Geppetto. He takes from Simon's body his pure ergo in the arm of God. The elevator at the center of the terrace starts to take them down, and while there's certainly unfinished business to see to with Geppetto, Gemini chirps up to ease the tension. A man becoming a god is terrifying, but a puppet becoming a human? Well, that's just interesting. But everything aside, he admits he doesn't know what's going to happen next, but he promises Carlo that he's stuck with him, and that he wouldn't have it any other way. What lay at the bottom of that elevator is a broken arena where Geppetto is waiting. This puppet, his son, his creation, has done precisely what he wanted of him. Collected ergo, empowered the P organ enough to sustain a human life, he defeated Simon Manus and collected the arm of God. Carlo's reward for this is being turned into a real boy. All he has to do is hand over the arm of God and his heart. He, as an awakened, self-aware being, will cease to exist, but Carlo will be remade. He dies so Geppetto's dream can come true. But Carlo refuses. He is living, he is aware, he is Carlo, and he will not die for Geppetto's obsessions. The old man refuses to see what's right in front of him. Instead, he calls Carlo a disappointment and goes to the chest where his nameless puppet has been stored all this time. This puppet was a being full of hatred, fueled by violence, both of which Geppetto has a use for now. He wants the P organ in Carlo's chest, and via the Grand Covenant, he orders the nameless puppet to get it for him. Strings control this being of rage. It has no freedom, no choice, no impulse other than to kill what's in front of it. Geppetto speaks during the foray, disclosing that the memories of Carlo are within him, and he was left unbound from the Grand Covenant for that vision of Carlo that he refuses to let go of. He compares what's taking place here to a father using a strap to hit their child to correct their behavior. Had this Carlo uncovered the memories of the long-dead Carlo during this venture, would Geppetto have treated him differently in the end? It's entirely possible, but would Carlo have made different choices, knowing what he does about the things Geppetto has done? It seems that no matter what soft, flowery things Geppetto could have said, this confrontation was inevitable. The moment he initiated the puppet frenzy, this was fated to happen. With a swing of his sword, Carlo cuts clean through the head of the puppet. This cuts the strings holding him down. Geppetto is no longer in control, and now the real brawl can begin. The nameless puppet is faster, somehow even more aggressive, a spectacular acrobat, and he feels impossible to anticipate. He matches Carlo's every strength and even shows himself to be the superior. While they fight, the voices of companions left behind stay with him. He hears Eugenie introducing herself, Lady Antonia speaking of her beloved memories of her youth, Vanini acknowledging Carlo's strong will to succeed, and Romeo's final words thanking him for giving him real freedom. He also hears the longing of Simon Manus to create a world of truth, and Sophia asking him to save Krot. Carlo fights with purpose beyond himself, and he carries every emotion attached to it, whereas this nameless puppet fights with a single, angry purpose: inflict pain. Carlo brings the nameless puppet to destruction's door, but he cannot stop its final attempt at taking victory. It knocks Carlo back and takes a final plunge towards him, but Sophia does not intervene. The attack is stopped by Geppetto. The nameless puppet runs him through, nearly up to the hilt of the blade. Despite his disappointment in the puppet who rebelled against him, it holds Carlo's heart. And that heart, he sees it as his son. He asks the nameless puppet in astonishment if he was going to destroy Carlo's heart. This opening is enough. Carlo punches into the chest of the nameless puppet, rips out his heart, and crushes it with his bare hand. It's finally quiet again, and it's clear that Geppetto isn't going to last long. Despite everything, Geppetto was still this being's father, and he's dying because he wanted his Carlo to live. The young man, the once puppet of Geppetto, cries while holding him, and the old man is finally able to see what was right in front of him the whole time: Carlo, his son. He apologizes to him, and then lets go. The great and troubled Giuseppe Geppetto has died. There is still a wrong that needs to be made right. Sophia. She lost everything. She was tortured to the point of her mind and body fracturing. She sought across salvation before her own. Someone saw to the creation of a puppet of Sophia, which Carlo finds in the ruins of the abbey. It's a puppet not quite as intricate as Carlo's body once was, but she's quite similar to what Romeo became. Carlo places Sophia's ergo into this puppet, and as she did for him long ago, gives life to the dormant heart in her chest, which saps the energy right out of him. When she awakens, she peacefully smiles, holds the slumbering Carlo, and whispers that it's so good to see him. Sophia will vanish for some time, but she leaves a note saying that she'll be nearby. It will take time and healing before the world can accept a being like her, a human made into a puppet, given a second chance at life. Carlo will be just fine. Soon he will return to Hotel Krant to reunite with his companions. The petrification disease must still be eradicated, and the aftermath of the puppet frenzy will be significant. They're all going to have their hands full in the months to come. All in all, the Krant experiment was quite successful. Oh, did you remember this was all part of an experiment? And it's time for Giangio, or rather, Philippus Paracelsus, to depart. On the train to his next destination, he rings an unknown woman to give his report. They have found a new type of humanity, another form of immortality, and a new brother in Carlo. Paracelsus assures the woman that once he's back, he is going to find her, another of their keys, Dorothy.